right, what's happening, everyone? Davey Death Ray here. Oh man, first live stream, and I'm a little nervous, but we got all the kinks worked out. We hopped on a little early to get it going. I'm sitting here with Vincent DiSanti from Womp Stomp Films. I'm sure you guys know him from Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow, Never Hike Alone 2, Jason Rising. You've
Oh my
also played
God.
Michael Myers in a couple shorts here, The Spirit of Haddonfield and The Face of Michael Myers. I caught up on those so I could see how you do when you
Nice.
play Michael. I was curious to check that out. So thank you so much for joining me, Vincent. I know you're a really busy guy and still trying to find that energy after the exhausting experience that was Never Hike Alone 2,
Yeah.
but a really rewarding experience. You guys raised a whole bunch of funds to get the film going. It was wildly successful on YouTube, and people sharing it all over social media. Tons of love from the horror community. So, yeah, thanks for having us. And a shout out to Cecil Laird for helping me with the setup here. Hopefully
Nice.
everything sounds and looks good. I see Tyler Adams in the chat there. Tyler, can you hear everything okay? And does everything look good? Just let me know. I'm brand new at all this, so just trying to figure it out. All right,
It's
so
our QC coordinator.
there it is. Got to have some quality control. You got to have a Creed Bratton, in there to make sure everything's running smooth. So,
Yeah.
Vincent, you're back home on the East Coast.
hmm
Tell us a little bit about life post-release of Never Hike Alone 2. How's everything going? What do you have, cooking, and how's that experience been going to screenings and everything?
I mean, this is the fun side of it, I guess you could say. The film's out. Well, I mean, first of all, it's good to see you, man.
Thanks.
Thanks for
Yeah.
having me on. Before I jump in, I think the last time we saw each other was that event was one of the Dylan's events, where we got a chance to talk a little bit. So it's good to
Yeah.
see. I'm glad you got this thing up and running. Congrats on, getting the YouTube, out there and fired up. So good work.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we saw each other at H45 too. I know it was kind of a
Oh, that's
wild
right.
weekend.
That's right.
It
We
it
did.
was
Yeah, that was a wild
such
weekend.
yeah.
It was one day for me, so it's like, and it's all a blur. But I forgot that we did bump into each other there. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
the whole,
your cousin was there too, right?
my brother. Yeah, my brother Matt.
Oh, that's your brother. Okay,
Yeah,
brother. Yeah,
he's
oh, it's your brother.
yeah, so
Oh,
he's
yeah.
about 10 years older than me, but we really bonded over film and music. So,
Good.
one of those things where like when you're a kid, you just look at your older brother and you're like, ah, my older brother. And then, as we became adults, it's like, oh, now we're friends, So,
Yeah, that's
um,
very similar. My two younger brothers. It's funny. It's actually tomorrow's my middle brother's wedding anniversary, and my youngest brother gave the best man speech at the wedding. And he said, it's fun being, with my brothers because they're not my brothers anymore. They're like my best friends. And so I totally get that. Like I'm super tight with my brothers as well. And so it's good that you guys have, and I could tell you guys like we're chilling and hanging out, and it really excited because he came on and helped, Never Hike Alone too. He came on and did some map painting for us, helped us up the gore a little bit. I
yeah.
mean, a lot of it. He did really, really great work. And that all came through just like bumping into each other, saying hey, and saying, hey, I might know somebody who wants to help out, which is a really cool kind of story behind getting someone onto the staff. So
Yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I was sitting there after we spoke at Gathering of the Ghouls. I was like, "Oh, should I bug this?"
Oh yeah,
At
that's right.
that
It
point,
was.
like when Cecil asked me to do, I see here Tyler had mentioned that he can only hear me in one speaker, so I want to try something out here.
Okay.
Does that sound any different? Because now I'm in one speaker in my headphones, Tyler. So let me know. um, yeah, so when Cecil was like, "Oh, Vincent's here if you want to talk," and I'm like, "Oh crap!" Like the rock star, the rock star.
I
Now
mean, come
I
on.
gotta talk to this guy, and I've never even, I think it was like at Mad Monster, the way that you kind of came out and emceed everything. Um,
hmm
was one of those things where I was like, man, this guy could like host his own late night talk show. This guy's got the whole thing down. So yeah, it was a little intimidating. But after we had talked, I was like, man, like you guys were just so great. I was like, I'm just gonna throw that bone out there because I'd love to get my brother involved in something like this, kind of like a DIY sort of project, because he's worked on some big things, but I think like just being able to get involved with something fun like this. I mean, Never Hike Alone 2 is probably the most anticipated uh, horror fan film ever. I remember
Oh,
seeing
man.
the very first one years ago when it first came out, and And yeah, like I said in that interview at Gathering of the Ghouls, when I saw that you were involved in Jason Rising, I was like, oh man, they got some big guns here. Um, so yeah, man, Halloween 45, that was quite the
Yep.
whirlwind, so quick. Yeah, now you're back east. You were just inducted
Oh.
into the Hall of Fame of your high school athletic department. So tell
Hmm.
me about that. Are you? I'm guessing football, just based on your stature, but what the heck do I know?
Part of it was football. It was actually for three sports. It was football, track, and baseball. Yeah, it was funny. Like Never Hike Alone 2 ended. I had been living abroad for a long time. Like I've been living in Los Angeles. I had started the process of moving back to Massachusetts, and I've been in the process of doing it for probably about a year and a half now because of the delays in Never Hike Alone. So, it was kind of nice because, Never Hike Alone was a long summer. We had a lot of work to do. We had a lot of setbacks. We had a lot of challenges that we had to face. And when I got home, I was very, very tired. We debuted Never Hike Alone 2 at Telluride Horror Show. And then I drove home from Telluride Horror Show with my girlfriend Mo, and we got back into Massachusetts, a day before my 40th birthday, which was the 21st of October. And it just so happened that on my birthday, I was actually getting inducted into my high school athletic hall of fame, which, to get back to the original question. And so it was for track, baseball, football. I was a running back, sprinter, outfielder, pitcher. I played, baseball in college. Major League Baseball was a big goal of mine growing up. So I've always had a competitive aspect to me. I've always been someone who has, striven to work really hard and do my best at whatever I do. And it was probably sometime in like college that I realized that like baseball probably wasn't going to be it for me. And I had always been a lover of film. And I
Mm-hmm.
loved the process of making film. And I was in television and film production at my school. And I was learning new techniques. I was learning how to cut and all that stuff. And I don't know, that same passion that I had to go up and, do whatever it was in sports and compete in sports. I had the same sort of passion for coming up with something cool to film and, impressing people. I've always been like a class clown type guy, like making people laugh, like getting reactions out of people. So it was very just sort of like seamless the way I transitioned from one thing to the other. But no, it was cool to look back. I mean, I graduated in 2002, so it's almost 20 years,
Yeah.
20 years since I graduated. But to look back, it was, I always remember high school with like very fondly because my senior year for me was a very cool experience. I broke the touchdown record my senior year. I was undefeated as a sprinter in the 50 and the 300, and then in high jump as well. I had a really good record. Went to states, did all those things, won a few things, and then baseball, just like played all over the place and played my ass off. Played for summer league, played many years and played 4 years in college. And it was, athletics was a big part of my life. And so to go back and sort of like remember that used to be such a big part of my life, because the last 20 years of my life have been all about film and
Yeah.
everything that I've done in the film world. And I really don't do as much athletic stuff as I used to. Like even in my mid 20s, early 30s, I was still like LABL when I was working in film. I'd go out every Saturday or Sunday and play with some, ex-college players and have a good time, or getting into
Nice.
Muay Thai and, studying martial arts was a big part of my life for a long time too. Like I did a lot of martial arts as a kid as well. So I've always just been very active.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been an active learner. Sitting in school and sitting still was not really my thing. So, in middle school, we didn't really have many athletics and like obviously nothing before that. So I was a terror. But when I got to high school, it was high school athletics that really straightened me out, that sort of gave me something to like pursue, be like, okay, I got to do my work because I want to go play after school. I
Mm-hmm.
want to compete on these teams. I want a chance to go out and be an athlete. And, that was always, I don't know, I'll always look back and there's a fun part of my life to be inducted into the High School Hall of Fame. Like I said, that night is really cool because I grew up where, my parents had gone to that school. The Hall of Fame is something that they just started a few years ago. So I'm in like the third class ever to get in, which is kind of cool.
Nice.
And, there were a lot of great athletes that went to that school that went on to like, a couple of them played professional sports. A lot of them played, collegiate or just did things with their lives that, went on to become members of the community that gave back and did those things. So, it was just sort of I don't know, it's good company to keep And, I was actually inducted with one of my coaches who was actually my freshman baseball coach, but he had been with the school, I want to say 40 something years, this guy, Lenny Rocha. And we all knew Lenny. And so like to get inducted alongside him, it was really, I don't know, it was just really special to me. And like I said, it was a special time in my life. I like to look back on it fondly. And to do that and now have a piece of it where, I went into that school hoping to make an impact. And, many years later, I'm looking back and saying, wow, hard work, it's worth it really for me. Hard work paid off. The mantra kind of came from, and that's just been my mantra ever since. Hard work pays off.
Yeah. So, what about, is there something from playing sports that you were able to take? I mean, I know like playing football, at least, I mean, all sports are about unity and the team coming together. What did you learn playing sports growing up that you were able to apply to filmmaking? Do you think that it sort of helped you streamline like the organizational process, or just, making sure that everyone knows their role and what their job is, and how to how to coach a team on the set?
Big time. I mean, I spent a lot of time coaching as a kid too. I went back and did a lot of youth coaching and, baseball instructional hitting. So communication and leadership and, guiding people and explaining things is something I've been doing for a long time. Like you said, when I got up there and emceed, like, I don't know, it's just one of my strengths is that my ability to go up and, talk. I can say things and, articulate what I want to say in a way that gets either people fired up or it gets people focused, or it just expresses exactly what needs to be said in that moment to, do what we need to do. And, in baseball and football, team sports in that realm, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of communication. Like as an outfielder, center fielder, there was a lot of communication between my other two outfielders and infield, calling out like where the ball's going, who's getting the ball, thinking ahead, how many outs are there, and always kind of keeping that. So it's always been like a part of my nature to sort of have that type of leadership on the field. So on a set, it's the same way. It's like, hey, we know what we're doing. Here's the situation. Here's how we're going to execute. Let's go run the play. And when the play doesn't run right, you have to figure out in real time, like what went wrong, who missed their block. Did someone run in the wrong hole? Did you throw to the wrong receiver? Did we do the wrong read? And, you don't have, a week to come back around and say, okay, let's go fix all these things. You got to do it right then and there, or else the game's on the line. So I think like that pressure too, that on the moment, in the moment pressure, time's running out. You only got 60 seconds on the clock and you got to score. So there's a lot of that type of again, it's the mindset, it's sort of those things. And then when it comes to execution, it's just about practice and repetition on the field. When you want to get good at a specific position, or you want to do something very well specifically, throw a curveball or, steal bases or whatever, the only way you're going to get good at it is to go through a repetitious process. So with film, it's the same way with me. I walk through scenes over and over again. I run them like plays in my head. I look at the script. I double check it against, what am I trying to do in these scenes, in that scene? And it's something that I'm constantly doing, where I'm constantly always preparing. And you can't be over prepared. That's like impossible in film. Like as much as you prepare, there's always something you won't be prepared for. So the more you prepare, the less you'll have to be surprised by, I guess you could say. That's the same thing in sports. I mean, how many times can you really sit back on your laurels and just get into a game and, let it take care of itself? You have to take control of the game at some point. Yeah. And that was something I loved to do as an athlete. Like I was, to my detriment, I think in some way, I was always like, give me the fucking ball. I was Keyshawn Johnson. I was like, listen, you want to solve this problem real quick? Give me the ball. Yeah. And I will do something with it. And luckily I was surrounded by 10 guys who, were very good at their jobs. And I knew like my job was I was fast. And that if they gave me the ball and they gave me enough daylight, that I was going to get through that line and I was going to score. And it happened more often than not. There's a reason why I broke, the season touchdown record. And, I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for, the team that was in front of me. And it's the same thing in film, like with Never Hike Alone and the reception that it gets and all of those things. It's really my team lifting me up to put me in that position, because everyone does their job so effectively, but they're all doing their job effectively also because I'm leading them into the path. So whether it's good or bad, it's usually going to come down on me. So if it's a real bad thing, no one's going to be like, well, it was that one guy in the credits who's way down the list. It's, no, all those people make me either look good or I don't lead them and I don't tell them how to do things correctly. And I'm the one, as they say, who has to answer the letters. So, I think that I guess I've just been used to dealing with that pressure for a long time. And so, yeah, I just get comfortable, and I don't mind being in that position. I actually thrive in it. I feel like the more pressure, the better I work. And, from there, it's just about following through on what you keep practicing.
Yeah, and I think the more experience you get, and you're able to bring in people that are really damn good at what they do. You're able to earn their trust by the way that you work. So it's almost like people, their trust in their head coach. You're there to give them that guidance, and yeah, it definitely shows. I mean,
Mhm.
Never Hike Alone was so impressive looking, and then to see, with a little bit of a bigger budget and some more time on the clock, at least as far as runtime goes, what what you guys were able to accomplish on Never Hike Alone 2 is
Mhm.
really damn impressive. I wish that I want everybody, if you haven't seen it, what the heck are you doing listening to Vin talk and not watching it? There should be a link in the description below. For God's sake, go check out Never Hike Alone 2. I just went to Thanksgiving for a second time the other day and ended
Mhm.
up talking to some people after the show. And I was like, have you guys checked out Dylan's new Nightmare? Have you checked out Never Hike Alone 2? Like, what are you doing? Like, get on it. Because, getting to bring Tommy back as a character is such a huge thing for so many fans. To be able to see that loose end. I mean, horror films and franchises, they're world famous for having a loose end and just saying, nope, we're going to do something completely different in this next sequel.
Mhm.
And a lot of them seem to almost do that every movie.
Mhm.
And so leaving Tommy behind and not really having closure there, being able to see, especially Tom Matthews come back and play Tommy, I think he does, the best version that we got in the films. I think Corey Feldman's great. And gosh, I'm forgetting the other guy's name right now.
John
I think
Shepard.
John Shepard. All right. Working with what they got, there you can't fault him, but there's something about Tom Matthews. He's got this, I always think of it as like genuine sweetness in his voice.
Mhm.
And you can tell that he's got conviction, and it's just like, please listen to me. I swear I'm not leading you wrong. There's something
Mhm.
about his delivery that, and maybe it's just the way that he is and it's natural in his own voice, but he just seems to embody that character so well. So,
Mhm.
I know you were able to get him back for the tail end of the original Never Hike Alone. What was that process like as you were going through with Never Hike Alone 2, just, beefing up that part? Was he on board from the very beginning and just ready to go? Or, what was that like?
Oh, totally. After Never Hike Alone, the original, Tom had a really good time. I think it woke something in him to say, acting, I miss acting. He came out, he did a good job. It was a one night thing for him, and his family got to see him out there, and he was really jazzed about that. And then, calls started coming in. He went and did Keller Therapy with our EP from Never Hike Alone 1, Barry J. He did a Western out in Michigan. He was doing, things here and there, little bit parts. I know he did a part in Final Summer for a good buddy of mine, John, and a few other things too. So I think it was cool to see him kind of like get that knack for acting back, because he's really good at it. And the reason why he's such a good Tommy is because he has a good leading man presence. Corey Feldman as a child really wasn't the leading man. He was meant to be who Corey
Hmm.
Feldman is. He's like the little little shit kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who's kind of got a little bit of it, who's a smart mouth, and he plays that role very, very well in that thing. And as a young Tommy, he's good. And John did a good job of playing Tommy as a traumatized teenager who was trying
Hmm.
to get over the loss of his mother, this crazy experience that he had, and the fact that he's haunted by Jason. And then Tom, sort of what emerges from that, this kid who has trained and sort of beat himself up for all these years, who's now ready to put an end to it, who accidentally like unleashes the monster again and has to, go through, relive the whole trauma just to like put Jason back in the lake. So when we were approaching Never Hike Alone 2, I told Tom from an early way that I was like, I wanted to bring the story of Tommy together for the
Hmm.
first time, because each Tommy sort of operates on its own island in the series, and I wanted to bring all three characters into one. So, we had Horace Stevie step in and play a young Corey Feldman Tommy, and then,
Hmm.
we had the John Shepard sort of flashbacks and things that Tommy was going through to show that like he is still this person, still dealing with these things. We also kind of echoed that out to other characters. That instead of watching Tom go through flashbacks through the entire movie, you watch 4 separate characters go through 4 separate flashbacks that all involve their experience with Jason. To see that this isn't a singular experience just for Tommy, but anyone who comes into contact with Jason in some way, even through third party, like with Rick losing his deputy and thinking that it's Tommy, being haunted by this sort of curse that hangs over Crystal Lake. So that was, so he was really on board with that. And he said, whatever you want to do, I'm in. And so I pitched him a story that was very much what Never Hike Alone 2 became. The ending was always the same. A lot of the beats throughout the film were the same. It was just a much bigger film because at the time we really thought we had a chance to pitch this to studios and make a studio film. We pitched to a few production studios. I pitched to one production studio at Soho House, which is really cool. And if you don't know what that is, I would suggest looking it up and seeing like what type of Hollywood like giants walk through that building every day. And it was just sort of a cool ride. And I was pitching to different people, and everyone was telling me Friday the 13th was a lost cause. Then Friday the 13th went through the legal battles, and we sort of hung back during that time and bid our time because we were told that like, hey, Victor's going to win. It's going to end, and do it. And there was actually one point before we started getting going on everything else where I had pitched Never Hike Alone as a concept, as a streaming series to a friend of mine who worked at Warner Brothers Animation. And I said, can you imagine Friday the 13th in animated form? I think it could be a cool thing. And since I have this background in animation, since I think that, there was a doctrine at that time that Warner Brothers really wanted to resurrect what any IP they had under the sun, they wanted to consider it for the animated wing. And I said, you guys have a connection to New Line. You own their distribution rights. Like, why don't you see if you can get get Friday the 13th in there? And then I have an idea on how to expand not just the Never Hike Alone storyline, but you could do an anthology every year where you release 8, Friday the 13th animated shorts, about a half hour long, half hour to 45 minutes. You get 8 different directors. If you got to hire 8 different companies that are all going to animate it and they all just have to deliver by a certain date for that season, you could do this for years. People coming up, and it's basically like what it was like fan films on crack. It was fan films, but fan films done by the industry's best directors, people who had had an influence, or had like some sort of like want or desire to work on a Friday the 13th film, but maybe they wouldn't have been able to work on just the one feature film that was eventually going to get released. But here's a chance to go and do like what Dave Filoni did with Clone Wars, which was get in there and just start developing different ideas. And when one of them catches, then that's the thing that's going to eventually, turn in either to your movie, or it's going to be turned into a streaming series all of itself, or it's going to turn into a line of toys, or it was something that was going to give something back to Friday the 13th with the ultimate goal of let's just keep it turning. So the product that we're creating is creating revenue that's going to keep the project turning, and more and more and more, because fans are going to want more stuff. And we could at least get a few seasons out of it, maybe before people got sick of it or we ran out of ideas. But that would be a fun few seasons that would always exist on their platform, that people would always go back every Friday the 13th. And now they'd have, 8 new things that year to watch. And then at the end of it, 32, 40, episodes that are all brand new little additions of Friday the 13th, either about Jason, adjacent to Jason, about Pamela, about other things, and just go in all these different directions. And I went in and I pitched. Well, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just saying you could cross over with any of those Warner Brother properties. Like I saw you posted something on Twitter the other week about like a Batman crossover.
Yeah, somebody hit me up about that. They were like, "What do you think this would happen?" I'd be like, "You know what? I mean, like they did Gotham by Gaslight. They did that new one where it was like a cross between Batman and H.P. Lovecraft, where you could do that and weave the stories of both the characters together. There's a lot of different ways that Jason as a character is so, pop culture. Like this is the first thing I said in my pitch. I had a picture of the mask on the screen, the Ghost Talk that we had, like an early picture of it. And I said, the wonderful thing about Friday the 13th is that no matter where you go in the world, if you show somebody that mask in every single language, they're all going to say the same exact thing, Jason. And they know exactly who he is. And he's so iconic. And so it's a shame that one of the most powerful marketing tools in all of cinema is sitting on the bench, not doing anything. And in fact, even when it is in full stream, in the last 30 years, it's only been able to release one film every 10 years, it feels like. And
Yeah.
so something that is so marketable and so malleable, because Friday the 13th is a pizza with 12 different slices.
Hmm.
There's a film for every type of fan in the series, whether, you want old school Jason, where he's more of a maniac in the woods, who's, seems like flesh and blood and will tear you apart with his bare hands, or the undead Jason that rises from the grave and reaps, hell until someone puts him back down, or the body jumping Jason, or the space
Yeah.
Jason, or the versus Jason, or, a remake Jason. Like all of these different Jasons all serve a different flavor of Friday the 13th fan.
Hmm.
And for studios to try and nail one thing down is such a risk. But if they spread it out and they spread those budgets out and they put those into, anthology style episodes, and I said, listen, I'm pitching this through animation. And they said like, well, would you do this live action? I said, I would 1,000% do this live action, but I think you have to involve animation too, because part of this anthology of doing things differently is to include things like this. So maybe don't overburden animation. Maybe do 2 or 3 episodes that are animated and do 5 episodes that are live action, or, CG, or whatever you want to do. The choice is yours for that season, depending on the budget and how big the visions are. And the idea is to get smart people in the room to write 8 episodes a year and do that. And then, in fact, the pitch went over great. I had pitched saying like, listen, what I would like to do is carry Never Hike Alone through the season. So I'll just keep telling every season there'll be a new Never Hike Alone installment. And so I'll control that. That will be me. I got a few other ideas I'd like to do, but that would be my main. And I pitched them all of Never Hike Alone. And I said, this is the story. And I pitched them Never Hike Alone too. Everything from, the hospital scenes to, the way that Tommy meets Kyle to, them going back to the camp. The original version ended with them setting that bar, like, Jason came in to capture them when they didn't actually find the head. They actually went in to find it and they couldn't find it. And so when Jason dropped into the ceiling, they hid. And he goes into that cage and they shut the cage and lock him in. And they set the entire place on fire. So they jump down off the balcony and land in the thing. They're like, you think we got him? And then you hear him running through the walls of this of the attic, and he jumps out the door in flames carrying his mother's head to save it. And as he lands, he like lands down and like stands up, and there's a big crack of lightning, and then the rain comes down and washes the fire out.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's how he originally got the head out of the attic. And so, very big ideas. These were like $1 million ideas that we were pitching, and it was it was fun. It was fun to pitch it. They, Warner Brothers loved the pitch. I went in for 3 different calls. I pitched to 3 different levels of executives, and it was looking like it was going to go to HBO Go, and then Sean filed an appeal. So basically, I got a call saying like, listen, as long as this thing's an appeal, we gotta put it on ice. And then we hit COVID. Or no, and then I was like, it wasn't going to be so long. So I went and I made Never Hike in the Snow, and then COVID came along. And Never Hike in the Snow was another proving ground to be like, look, we did it. Like, we raised 150 grand. I gave you a half-hour pilot. Here's the first episode to your series. And the people still working there were like, well, it's still in the thing. We'll get back to you when, it lifts and all that stuff. And then by the time COVID came out, by the time the lawsuit settled, all those people that I was talking to at Warner Brothers, they're all gone. I mean, there was a complete regime change. So now they're all spread to the wind at other places. And my main contact is working for, another company now too. So that specific avenue moved on me, and it was sort of like, that's just how it goes in Hollywood. But those are the types of things that I think that excited Tom. You know what I mean? Going back all the way to that was that we were gone all that far. That's how far it was figured out. And even after all that was falling through, I turned to Tom and I was like, hey, we can crowdfund this. After Never Hike in the Snow, after we raised $125,000, I was like, I think we can raise enough for the feature. And if not, we'll just keep making it in pieces. Let's just keep giving it a shot. And so, he stuck with us. And he knew that when he got the call that it was going to be a film about him. This was Tommy's story. This was everything from Tommy's point of view. And it was, as a fan, super rewarding because I got to do the thing with Friday the 13th that I always wanted to see it do, which was continue a storyline all the way through to an end that makes sense.
Yeah. And
it's something I've been wanting for a long time as a fan. And, in the end, it ended up, having to do it myself. Waiting. If I would have just waited for the studios to do it, we'd still be sitting here waiting. If I never made Never Hike Alone, I doubt you would see, 90% of the fan films that you see out there right now, because people really wouldn't see the point. You know what I mean? They wouldn't be something that's, a beacon to say, if you do it well, this happens. You know what I mean? So when we did that with Never Hike Alone, it wasn't just sort of doing the things that I wanted to do with Friday the 13th and use it as a way to say, here's what I want as a fan, and have other fans jump in and be like, yeah, we want that too. This is great. We're going to watch it and tell people about it. It showed people that it was like, well, that wasn't for me, but I got a story to tell and I want to tell it. And then you get things like, my friends, James and Carl, who make the Jason Rising project, and you get people, doing all sorts of stuff all over the world, and people have all of a sudden participating. And I think that was the coolest thing, was the amount of participation that took place after Never Hike Alone, to say that like Friday the 13th fans weren't going to wait for the studios anymore. They were going to take their own cockamamie ideas and put them on crowdfunding and raise money and do it themselves. Come hell or high water, come like low or high production. Like, it was just going to get done. And it was pretty funny to see like some of the ideas just take off. And there were ideas that got made that you would say like, how the hell did it ever get made? And then there's stuff that didn't get made. You're like, how didn't that get made? Yeah. And it was just like, it was the Wild West, you know what I mean? But everyone was being creative, and, you're working off of a franchise that exists. You're, doing things that have been pre-written or any of that. But everybody had such like a unique, again, like look at the unique takes that we saw of who Jason was to all these different people, the way they designed him, the way they made him move, all of these different things. It just goes to show you how diverse everyone's sort of vision of Jason is. And then you saw the different levels of what it looks like at different levels of production, and why some films look better than others, and some were able to overcome it because they had a good story, or others were able to, put together a really slick production. Everyone sort of brought something to the table, but it was much better than nothing happening at all, because whether the fan films were there or not, no Friday the 13th content was coming out.
Yeah, and I think people, clearly people are inspired by when they see somebody like you that just is like, well, if no one's going to do it, I'm just going to do it myself, God damn it. So I think that's great. I think that's kind of how a community gets built, right? Is somebody goes out there and they do something that people are like, wait, you can do that? And then they're like, I think I want to do that. And then they do that. And then slowly you have this huge community built up. You're able to crowdfund a really awesome amount for Never Hike Alone 2. And yeah, we're just seeing more and more. I mean, they keep on coming. We've got, there's, Cecil was here in the chat for a sec. I'm not sure if he's still there. Shout out Cecil. Dylan's New Nightmare, which you got involved with as a producer, has, I think kind of fallen in that same line, but just with Freddy. So I think that, horror fans have so many likes. I'm like, if I had to pick, I'd say that Michael Myers is my favorite of the icons, but I love all these guys. Like, I mean, Friday the 13th is my wife, Kate, like that's her favorite of the, the iconic series. I think I can have more fun with the Jason flicks than I can have with the Halloween movies, because the bad Halloween movies kind of like hurt my feelings. But the lesser Jason movies, they're just so like comic booky and fun. So even though Jason X isn't like the trajectory I'd like to see the whole series go, it's like, well, it's not bad that we have that. I mean, it's not,
Honestly, I want to see Jason X too. I think that could be a really rad movie. If I think that like again, that's where an anthology series on streaming would have been so good, because that's where you can send Jason X to, because no one's going to get mad if one episode of an 8-episode series is dedicated to Uber Jason. I think people would be okay with that. I think that they would welcome it. I mean, one episode dedicated to Savini Jason from the game, watching him in hell, a young Jason, an old Jason, like they do with the Batman. The Batman gets so many different retakes and retellings and like new animated things every other year. And it never gets old. I could keep watching them. I mean, Godzilla is on his 80th film now, and I'm still lining up on day one to go see it. Like, Jason is that big. And Jason is that everyone says like, oh, it's just, put them in the camp, do this, do that, and it's easy, and it's not. Making a good Friday the 13th film takes a little bit of talent. It's not just a guy in a mask, and it's the same thing with Michael too. It's like certain things can throw off an entire watch for somebody. The way the costume looks,
Yeah. Oh my
the way
God.
the way the character is acted, the situation that
Yes.
they're put in, that and I think when you make people wait so many years for something, the anticipation and the want for it to be really good goes up. And when it doesn't deliver at a very high level, like the disappointment level is high too. And that's how I felt about the remake. I waited so long for that movie for somebody to turn around and say like, oh my God, you get a fresh start. You get to look at all
Yeah.
the other films and say, hey, we can fix this. Like,
Hmm.
we're no longer filmmakers just, chasing the next feature because we're getting paid to do it. Like, we actually have a chance to like now tell a 3-4 part story, knowing that the audience is built in and they'll be here if, we do it right. And,
Hmm.
2009, for all of its fans and all those things, and the positive things that it brought to the community, and the fandom that it built, it didn't build up a big enough of fandom or confidence with the
Hmm.
studios to say, yes, Friday the 13th is worth spending another, 40-60 million on to
Yeah.
get the return that we're going to get. And maybe that was an error on part of Platinum Dunes making it a $20 million feature. Maybe Friday the 13th needs to remain a $5 to $10 million sort of production.
Hmm.
Um, there's certain things that you got to look at, like how big is your fan base? How much is that fan base going to return for your product, which will determine how much your product should cost the studio so they can get a return as well, and everyone can get paid on the show.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that like it got a pretty good shot in 2009, but there were no sequels that came after it. And where they
Yeah.
left it and the directions that they went, it wasn't necessarily, I know the writers are big Friday the 13th fans, but I don't think the director was all that invested in, lore and continuing the franchise and setting it up for multiple entries. He was just trying to make one movie that was good and
Hmm.
insular. And that's not what Friday the 13th needed. You know that the characters are going to come back. You know that there's going to be more films coming. So set
Yeah.
yourself up for it, or else you run into the same issues that the franchise lost viewers in the past for, which was, not continuing continuity, not coming up with clear storylines about who or what Jason is. It's like the more ambiguity, oh, fucking that word up, ambiguity that there is there,
Yeah.
ambiguity, there it is.
Ambiguity.
Ambiguity. There's more syllables, guy.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to dive into that remake because I think that, like, for me, there's a lot there that I really love, but I totally hear what you're saying. I did want to, this is my first time going live. I wanted to hop in the chat here and just make sure that, we address some of the people's questions here
oh
and all
yeah,
that.
totally.
Because I hate when I follow a live stream and I'm sitting there sending them a message and asking them questions and they blow me off. Like,
Look at me,
what are
look
you
at
doing?
me.
Yeah, come on, Dave
Yeah,
McRae.
okay.
No, I'm just joking. He's great. He's great.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
as someone who has run a couple of these things, it is like you're like constantly doing this, like bouncing back and
sure.
forth, looking for. It's tough,
Yeah.
but you have time to scroll through. You'll be all right.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to, Tyler Adams is in here. He's a visual effects artist. He actually worked on that Uncharted fan film that Chris Stanley was a part of. So
Nice. Yeah, yeah,
Tyler
that
did
came
some
out good.
effects work there. And so let's see here. I'm going to see if he's got a question here. Corey is great in an ensemble. Yes, I agree. I love Donatello in that original Ninja Turtles movie. I think that Ninja Turtles movie from '90 is the perfect mix of the comic book and the cartoon. Just enough for kids, but serious enough. How about Jason taking on the turtles? That'd be fun. Yeah, he says
Hey.
animation is a great idea. Yeah, I think like when you started saying Jason animation, I'm like, oh, like even like a motion comic episode, like you could have each episode done by a different animation house, so it has a
Hmm.
totally different look. Like I really like you mentioned the Clone Wars that Filoni had done, but I really liked the Clone Wars shorts cartoons from Cartoon Network. I can't remember that guy's last name. It's a crazy like Polish Eastern European last name. He did Samurai Jack, I think. Um,
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
those were really fun. And then let's see here, Alley Girl's in here. Hey everyone, always glad to listen to some Never Hike Alone talk. And let's see here, the hospital scene is so perfect. Yes, Yeah, everyone was talking about that hospital scene in Never Hike Alone too. You get the red light, you get some of the first person kind of, look out of the masks as they're getting brutalized there. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, that really fun shot of Jason holding the nurse with her guts hanging out. And when I saw that was a shot that my brother worked on, I texted him. I'm like, dude, I just want to let you know people are freaking out about that scene and that shot. Like, you were able to work on a shot that is gonna go down in history as an iconic Jason shot. So thanks for putting that in the movie, Vin. That's some good shit there.
No, I mean, it was an idea that was there for a long time. There were different ways that I was going to execute it. There was one version where it was going to be they used to all be coming around a corner where Jason was chasing them from around the corner. In my head, the way the layout of the hospital was a little bit different.
Mhm.
And Jason basically has like an IV stand and he just like
Oh,
runs her
okay.
through.
Like King
Um,
Arthur just running it.
yeah, just like bam, right through her chest, and she's just like, ah, and gets like totally wasted. But I got the bill for building an IV stand that could like do all of these things and like build so it looked good.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's way too expensive for one kill. That's not like the Rick kill or some of the other bigger things that we did.
Yeah.
It had to be spread because there was such a big scene there of like doing a bunch of stuff, so it had to be spread out.
Yeah.
So we came up with a couple of ideas. Like there was one where he smashed her head against the wall, and then I came up with the idea of doing what I called like the dip, like where he dips her,
Hmm.
like
Yeah, like a
he
dance
trips
move.
her
Yeah.
up and then catches her, and there's almost sort of like it's almost romantic in a way
Yeah.
where like you catch there like how like wait a second, you're supposed to let me fall to the floor type moment, a moment of
Yeah.
like, wait, did you help me? And then he takes the sickle out and he's like, nope, and
Yeah.
just like cut her up. So it was I don't know, it was a fun little storytelling device. And then of course, pulling out Wyatt at the end for that final shot with the guts hanging out and seeing the two dead cops, the head on the
Hmm.
ground, the blood everywhere, the guts, and Jason like looking and posing with the sickle and like, this dead nurse in his hands before he goes and, kills the one last person who's in the hallway. The security guard, and all happening in front of Rick to like really just prove that like, hey,
Drive it home.
asshole,
Yeah.
yeah, Jason is real.
Yeah.
And finally getting that storyline through. So there's like, it's fun, but there's also a lot of storytelling in it as well. So it was, I think my favorite thing was definitely doing like the GoPro stuff, because it was such a callback to Never Hike Alone of taking the audience on a
Hmm.
ride with the first person and using the body cam images to see what it looks like as like you're being attacked as Jason, which I
Yeah.
thought would be a pretty cool like turn of events. And so seeing him axe the one and then punch the other, it was sort of always a fun, like it was the 1, 2, 3 punch of it all
Hmm.
of that scene of like hit the two, roll the head, hit the two cops, and then kill the nurse, and you get sort of like a nice big montage in that moment, which was, fans want to see stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I love writing stuff like that, and I love writing big action. So it was definitely cool. It was a challenge to make happen, but I'm glad that we were able to make it look as good as we did.
Yeah, and the editing I think is really comes into play there, especially going back and forth from the GoPro to the standard camera shots, just like making it all play well. That's got to be a fun part too, kind of putting it together in that final form where you get to. I always think of editing as kind of controlling the tempo. It's sort of like the
Mm-hmm.
drummer. You get to control the beats, but then matching the shots up so everything is again just something that people, really professional look that most people would see it in a fan film and be like, "This is a fan film," and I think that's one of those things about what you guys have done with the Never Hike Alone series is you've been able to elevate. This is what's possible here. If
Mm-hmm.
you take it seriously and like you say, it does play into the story. It's not just mayhem for mayhem's sake. Like you do have a beautiful shot of Jason standing there, like, look at this stage that I've made with these bodies everywhere. So you have that payoff moment. But
Yeah, and
there's a
he's not so
purpose.
much like gleefully like being like, haha, look what I did. It's just more of like on to the next victim. And he's just sort of
Hmm.
like, and then the way that he drops her and just steps over her body and keeps going, that he's just this freight train. He's like this immovable object that's just going to keep coming no matter
Yeah.
what happens. And whatever gets in his way is going down. You know, so let me see who mentioned that. Mitch, mentioned sort of the, um, the the scene between Tommy and Anna, where they're both outside, kind of commiserating. I call that the
Oh yeah,
Romeo and
yeah.
Juliet scene because she's up in the balcony. But yeah, I mean, I think that like what's equally for me, what I'm equally proud of in Never Hike Alone is the moments in between the chaos are, characters on real journeys, characters with real issues that are dealing with them in real time and dealing with them in a real way. And, a lot of it is really grounded. The film does, unground itself, obviously, in many different ways. But for the most part, the emotional through lines for every single character are very grounded. Nothing is, over the top or, made up or like just out of nowhere. It's just like, yeah, this is what would happen. And, and I sort of, that's the other thing I always wanted to see in Friday the 13th was seeing like a grounded version of, what does Crystal Lake look like? Where does this play? Like, we're all from a Crystal Lake. You know what I mean? Like from like Westport, where I'm from, like it's definitely a Crystal Lake. It's a small town, small police force, not a lot of stuff goes on, but a lot of forest, a lot of people can go missing out there. We've had stories of the past that, the local legends around here is that there used to be like Satan worshipers that would sacrifice people in the forest and, different murder sites all over the woods around here. We had a serial killer going up and down our highway, in the 80s and 90s. It's super famous. It was like, it's called, I think it was the Highway Killer or something like that. And it was in New Bedford. It was based out of New Bedford, and he was picking up prostitutes and leaving them all over the place in this area. So, I think I just tried to look at it from that standpoint of what was it like growing up, hearing the stories, but never actually seeing any of this stuff. And was it just a story or was it real? I have nothing to be scared of. I've never been in line of sight. Yeah. And taking that and saying like, okay, let's take that same thought, but do it with Jason. And that's really where a lot of the inspiration for Never Hike Alone 1 came along. And then coming out of that logic was how I was able to justify everyone's reactions and things like that for the way that they react to Never Hike Alone 2. But yeah, like, people lost loved ones, in these films. And that's something I wanted to address too, which was, the concept of loss, the concept of losing somebody that, the death is permanent and it has impacts on people. And it leaves lasting impacts on people. And that's the way Tommy is the way he is. And that's why Anna is becoming who she is becoming. And she's starting to have a mental break. And if I had more time and money and story and doing all those things, I probably would have expanded it into her maybe getting close to almost becoming a Pamela Voorhees herself. Okay. Almost sort of like going crazy.
Because she lost her son.
Losing it because she lost her son and maybe starting to attack some people, or maybe even getting into a fight with Rick or something like that. But, again, when you look at a budget that you have, you look at the time frames that you have, you sort of have to pick like what is the most important lines of the story and what do I stick with? And, I chose what I chose for the storylines that went through. And I feel like those are the ones that are the core units to help tell this story. But there were lots of opportunities in different places to go and further expand on these characters. I just didn't really have I didn't have the bandwidth or the funding to go and do that. And that's where you start to see things. That's when, you're talking about $1 million movies where you're able to add those extra scenes, add those extra days, and really kind of work those moments in versus,
one of the things that is really great about Tom's performance there, I mean, I love that. So Tommy blames himself, in Jason Lives. It's a part of his character is that he feels ultimately responsible, and that's why he wants to, kill Jason forever. And then he F's it up again, and then so you can see when they have that Romeo and Juliet scene, the look on his face is that he feels like he knows what happened to her son, and he feels there's like a certain level of responsibility and also just like worry for her. And I think like one of the great things that Tom does is acting with his face. And I know it's like a simple thing to say, like, of course actors use their face, but he's able to convey, like you're saying, you don't have the budget to go into everything, but he's able to show certain level of emotion just through what he does with his face that kind of, puts more there than what's just on the page. So yeah, I mean, really great like character moments there. I love that about Tommy. I love that even the opening scene where he's driving out to the camp, it reminds me of the opening scene of Jason Lives where he's driving out to the cemetery. It's got that, he's a man on a mission and he's not going to stop until he, it feels good and has peace of mind for himself. And then, of course, you got like when he and Rick run into each other, it's like, oh, these guys are picking up right where they left off.
Mm-hmm.
Really great back and forth between those guys. I mean, the performers look like they're having a hell of a time. I always like those guys' dynamic. That's one of the reasons why Jason Lives is my favorite in the series, is just the, you know, the dynamic of the performances. Everything just seems so natural in that movie, and it's really cool to see it, or at least, you know, parts of it translate over to Never Hike Alone.
Yeah, totally. And I can't tell you how frustrating it was, like knowing that's where it was going to go and having to make people wait from Never Hike in the Snow all the way to Never Hike Alone 2, and having the answers, just not being able to share them. Like,
Yeah.
you know, people wanted to know what happens next. And, you know, there it was. It was like, you know, that scene where Tommy going up like that, I've been waiting to film that for so long. And when we finally got to film it, it was so therapeutic. I was just like, finally, like the images are coming to life. I've had like, those were some of the first images for the film that I had, was that like, we're going to show people what Tommy's plight is. Like, why hasn't he seen him? He goes up there, he's ready to fight. He's ready to do everything. He's armed. He's, you know, he's going to kick doors in. He's going to find Jason. He's going to make it. He's going to find him and kill him. And Jason never shows up. Jason knows to avoid him and just avoid the headache. He's just letting this guy go nuts, you know, and if he ever needs him, he may resurrect him again. So he's like, you know what I mean? This guy's liable. And you just see that like he's doing that because he's trying to overcompensate for the fact that like this is his fault. You know, all those memes that you see about Tommy are true. Like, but imagine having to be that guy. Like, you got to live with that. And so we wanted to show what that was like.
Wait, there are people making memes about Tommy? Are they being mean?
Yeah, of course they are.
That's terrible.
You know, so there's that. You know, and then with him and Rick, it was like same thing. You get a lot of backstory between them to see that like what's going on here. The fact that like, you know, Tommy's a nuisance and there's not much Rick can do about it. And Rick's biggest fear is that Tommy's going to snap. And, you know, you see that in his face. You see it in the war. You see it in the flashbacks that he goes through. It's, you know, everybody again is sort of grounded in not only in their own reality, but it is directly connected to the previous films in a way that enhances them, that continues and honors those storylines in a way that you would honor a storyline in a season of television. Like you wouldn't like, you know, you'd never see a season of TV where the guy changes costume, you know, you change the actor every single episode. You know what I mean? Like the lead actor, I guess you do in some of these body jumping ones, but, yeah, I'm trying to think of that show that came out a few years ago where it kept changing. It was like, I don't know. Anyway, there was a TV show. Quantum Leap, yeah, but I mean, there was always Scott Bakula in the mirror. Yes. But no, there was another one like Avatar. It was like an Avatar one where like you became an avatar and then your conscious would be sent to another body and stuff like that, which was kind of cool. But in these, like, I don't know, it just felt nice to actually continue a storyline and honor it and, you know, take them in a direction that like, you know, Tom McLaughlin did a great job of setting up characters and he made a world like. More than most of the other filmmakers in the Friday the 13th world, he built a world. You know, like, you know, Adam Marcus built a world. He just didn't build a world that like we were all expecting to see. And in a way sort of, you know, turned off a large section of the crowd because he didn't really keep the train on the same tracks. He built a new set of tracks, a new set of rules, you know, a new set of ball players, a whole family bloodline that we had no clue about. And sort of introduced all these things way too late in the game. Whereas if you wanted to do those things, you would have introduced them always over a series of films earlier on in the franchise and had it all lead to something. And I think that fans of Friday the 13th, as much as we love them for what they are and what they were, you know, I think a lot of us see the future as a chance to be like, okay, so this time you're going to actually like pay attention, right? Like you're going to continue storylines, we're going to make characters and we're going to stick with them. And, or if you don't, like Jason's story has to carry the story. You know what I mean? Like Jason has to carry some of the story work if you're going to connect two different peoples about, you know, what's going on with Jason and how is he connected to the same Jason that we saw in the previous movie and what is his motivation and where is he at and what is he trying to achieve in these films? And I know that Steve Miner, you know, famously said, don't think about it. You just want to kill her. That just runs dry after a while. The well has run dry on that simplicity of it. And, I think you can get away with it in one-off films, but if you want to build a franchise, you want to do that. And I think that Friday the 13th fans wanted that. They wanted continuation. They wanted something that felt like it was connected. And there's a lot of different ways it goes wrong too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Steve had the benefit of being able to do the second and the third film. So at that point, like, yeah, just having a
but even he like
A-okay.
drastically changed the costume and like drastically changed Jason's stature and actor and like even he sort of, as much as I consider him really the godfather of Friday the 13th from the standpoint that he's the one who made Jason as we know him and created and perfected the formula that took the series to new heights. Like the original Friday the 13th, like, was great, for what it did back then, but for what the rest of the series became and who the fan base became, they're not necessarily there for the first movie. They're there for Jason.
Yeah.
They're there for more Jason. And so, I think that, it was sort of a haphazard sort of like handoff from one filmmaker to the next, making different, each one making different errors, in their own way or trying to do things. Tom McLaughlin changed the town name to Forest Green, and in part 7 they changed it right back, and all these different things of no consistency or no explanation, and not only no attempted explanation, and like you could do it and it could be very clunky. And I think that like everything that I tried to do with Never Hike Alone was take all of these sort of clunky story things that don't line up and just position them in a way that you could see that like I could imagine that existing in one world.
Yeah.
Bringing it together and make it all feeling like part of the same continuity. So it all like, all the different, instruments that were created here are now all playing the same tune. And then now we can finish the song because we're all playing the same thing. And that's what Never Hike Alone became. The series in general was picking up where Friday the 13th left off, ignoring a lot of the threads that were just dead threads that didn't lead to anywhere, and picking up on the things that fans were still continually cared about, and then introducing new things that were equally as, well set up. We set up Anna over the course of 2 films. Kyle was set up over the course of 2 films. Tommy was set up in this one over the course of 3 films, and eventually leading to his story. And they all led together, and all of these different people from different stories in the Never Hike Alone universe came together in the final one to all work together because Never Hike Alone. And it became thematic to the name of the entire thing. So it's like fans, when you reward them with content that's written that way, it's rewarding as a viewer. You know what I mean? As a viewer to see all of those things being, well, why and who and what, and you finally get your fans to go, oh, that's what you mean. Wow, cool. I get it. And that's what really, I think that like I had somebody come up to me during the process of, finishing the film, this guy, Dustin Fine, who from, they changed it, Ronin Creative, who came up and, did our feature, our trailer for us and, really helped with some of the post-production stuff. He was like, Vin, I can't believe no one ever thought to destroy the head before.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, it's so brilliant. It makes so much sense. He's like, I buy that. And I think that that's what I was looking for. I was looking for that validation of like, Friday the 13th fans being told, here's my theory. This is how you destroy Jason. And everyone going, I buy that. That makes a lot of sense. It's built into the narrative. It's there from the very first movie. It's inspired by the first and second movies. So it's something that's foundationally a part of Friday the 13th that Friday the 13th never went back to and should have. And that's why he did it. And, that if you're going to kill Jason, you got to kill Jason. You got to end him once and for all. You got to give him a death blow that he's not going to get back up from. However, in following all of the rules of Friday the 13th, I did want to at least give some nods to the New Line films in some way, but I've always liked the simple explanation of, Pamela saying to Jason or Freddy versus Jason, no matter what they do to you, you cannot die. Yeah. And I took that as not a gift. She says, this is your gift. And I didn't see it as a gift because everything in Friday the 13th is a curse. So I saw that as this curse, that no matter what, even if he threw himself in front of a bus and said, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, he's still going to get back up. He's still going to have to go claim lives. And, and there's nothing he can do about it. And I think that the true ending to Friday the 13th isn't Jason's death because Jason can never truly die. That's his curse. But that Jason can rest. And he's not motivated and he doesn't feel like he has to stay out of the water and protect his mother's head anymore, that her spirit will always be there, whether there's a head there or not. And if that's the case, then what am I doing all this for?
Yeah.
Send me away, Tom. Play me out.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And he goes into the water, and that bubble at the end of the movie is a sigh of relief.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it's also like,
It's the
you know,
death
that
rattle.
it's the death rattle, but there's also a little bit like, hey, because something's still going on there, don't fuck with them.
Hmm.
Do not mess with that corpse, because if you do, bad things will happen. But now he's sort of back to, I think, more of a swamp thing type creature where like you can disturb it, it will come out, it will wreak its revenge on the people that is like immediately disturbing it, and then he'll go back to rest.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
Now at that point, you got to be asking for it, because to go down to the bottom of the lake and do something down there with his corpse would be very kind of very hard to kind of figure out. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I could ever, and I've said this before, like you can never say that like, yeah, that's it, Jason's dead, it's over, because
Hmm.
someone could always come along and prove you wrong doing easy things.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't say that Jason's dead. I will just say that Jason is at rest at the end of Never Hike Alone 2. And that's what I was proud of. And I think it was a good middle ground for everybody to say, yes, he's, you know, we took him out hard. Like that, this is the hardest death he's ever faced in his
Yeah.
entire existence in these films. But if he wanted to, he could come back. And you know, it's the simplest thing ever. It's so funny, but it makes me laugh to think about it. Like, yeah, that's do it. And I'm like, you know what? He would get back up from this, and this is what would, like, immediately. My head was like, oh, I
Yeah.
know how
What's
he comes
next?
back.
Well,
This is
I
how
mean,
he comes back. This will be fun. Yeah.
yeah, that's the great thing about all these characters is they can just keep on going forever. You know, it's like you were talking about Godzilla, and then there's characters like Dracula, where it's like, yeah, we just keep on getting new iterations of the character and new storylines. Speaking of bringing people back, Lupe was in the chat earlier. Who of the Friday the 13th survivors, aside from Tommy, would Vincent like to see return?
I mean, I obviously love to work with Amy Steele and do a Ginny spinoff. We got her a little bit for Jason Rising, but just as a voiceover. But if I could bring back her and Adrian for Jason Rising 2, which is in talks, we could totally, you know, we came up with a storyline for them that was really, really good and really respectful. And again, these are things that line up with their characters and the way that they were written, where they were going to go, and something that these, you know, these actors can be proud of, to say, if you're going to bring my character back, make it worth it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the one thing we did with Adrian too, was the fact that, like, listen, like, you've been going on for years about like Team Adrian, Adrian never died, or, you know,
Yeah.
Alice never died, Team Alice, like justice for Alice, all this stuff. And, you know, I mean, we all saw the corpse with the ice pick stuck in the head, you know, at the base of the part 2 thing. But what are fan films for, if not for
Yeah.
something like this? And so I think that would be a good one. I would love to do a film, honestly, with like Reggie the Reckless and John
Mm.
Shepard, and have them accidentally resurrect Roy, and do like a
The
Roy's
Roy
Revenge.
sequel. Yeah.
The Roy's Revenge. And I've had a friend, my friend Mike Sims, pitched me a version of that. That he really, really wants to do, and I would 1,000% support that. I would love to see Roy, Undead Roy, would be friggin' cool. Um,
Yeah, that would be a,
Let me
you know,
see. And then Jason X2. Honestly,
yeah.
Jason X2 would be like one of my favorite things. And in fact, I pitched something with a cosplayer. Um, why? Only because I'm blanking. Oh, Jordan Harvey. He does a remake, and you know, I'm not a huge fan of the remake, but he does a remake style Jason. We talked about a fan film that could work for remake Jason, that would actually, I think, be a better story than the remake itself. And we've talked about, like, okay, if these are the things they introduced in that movie, here are the things that I would have liked to have seen happen.
Mm.
And there were opportunities to do, and you could do them because you're a fan filmmaker and you can just run with it. Well, not fan filmmaker yet, but he's working on it. But that's the thing. It's like, of all levels, you can come up with good ideas. You got a good costume, you're off to a good start.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he knows people who can film. You know, the guys at 13 Gallows Lane and a lot of people that are involved in that area of New York. I think that he could find a lot of help to like bring that to life, keep it short, keep it you know, keep it cheap,
Hmm.
and then let her rip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And see what he can do, which would be a lot of fun. Let's see what. Got any more good questions up there in the chat? I see him flying by, so I want to make sure we don't miss anybody.
Okay. Okay. Let's go through. Gosh, there are a lot. You guys are active in here. Thanks for coming out. I was curious to know what this would be like.
Yeah.
Uh,
I see a lot of familiar faces. Mitch, obviously. Mitch always comes to the chats. He's always got a ton of good stuff.
nice.
I'm also a few minutes behind, I think, on the YouTube. So, but
Oh,
you
got.
know,
Let's see here. What plans do you have for a Womp Stomp original slasher genre or question mark?
I really don't have anything in the original slasher genre. I just feel like anything that's a slasher is just ripping off Jason or Michael. I mean, and that's what I always said. Like, listen, I don't want to, and no offense to anyone, but like, I don't want to make Hatchet. I don't want to make Friday the 13th
Sure.
adjacent. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I want to work on Friday the 13th or bust. And so
Yeah.
I would have rather done it myself and done a slasher in the way that I think is done with the greatest slasher of all time than try to invent some new mask or something that like I'm just really not about passionate about. The other stories I want to tell are just like completely different. There's a ghost hunting story that I want to tell called EMF. That's something that I want to crowdfund an original project. That I think we can get made for about like 30 grand. I want to
Wow.
produce it out here in Massachusetts or New England somewhere, using the resources and filmmaking connections that I'm making out here. I just worked with a very good crew on a historical short film called Sweet Freedom in New Bedford and the surrounding area this past weekend, which was really good cast and crew. Operating under a director Alyssa Batello, who's a local filmmaker who went to school at URI, and I was set dressing on that for the film, which I can't tell you is as a complete relief to not be in charge of the entire product and be like, I
Yeah.
just need a set, which is
Yeah.
something that I've been loving doing. And something that, I worked a lot with when we did Dylan's New Nightmare. Josh Schultz and I did a lot of the production design set dressing where we go in and we dress the set and we talk about the way the set should be laid out, work with Cecil and that. And that's something that, when I'm not directing, I've been trying to get out of production. I've been trying to get out of like ADing and things like that. I think I'm starting to realize that like props, production design, art direction, set dressing, that's maybe my department, the department that I
Oh,
want to
okay.
belong to.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I just really like it. I like building sets. I like getting my hands dirty. I like making things. I don't like filling out documents and sending emails. It's
I
like
mean,
give me a truck full of furniture and let me,
yeah.
dress this house or dress this like dressing the camp, building the camp is some of my favorite things to do for Never Hike Alone. That's like my happy place. It's when I'm most happy is when I don't have to talk to anybody. I just got a hammer and a saw and I'm like, just leave me alone with this
Yeah.
pile of wood for a couple of days and you'll come back and all of a sudden the attic is completely rechanged. Um,
Yeah.
so
Just doing something a little more creative and hands on rather than having to, yeah, fill out the paperwork.
Oh yeah,
Um,
totally. But we want to do a short film called EMF. I want to do an animated film called Ghost Chicken. These are projects that have been in the Womp Stomp film sort of stable for a while, waiting for Never Hike Alone 2 to sort of get out of the way. We do have Ghost in the Fog still as well, the Never Hike Alone animated short that we're working on. We're going to try and raise more money for it next year. Um, what else do we have in the pipeline? Lots of different shorts. We're working with different people on different things. Bath Bombs are going to be coming out soon. And then you brought it up before the thing, but we also have a co-production with a good friend of mine, Robert Vorncall, and his company, Collage Montage, Thirsty Whale, and one more that just escapes my brain right now. But a very good team brought together the film Fragment, which was a co-production.
yeah.
I was just a co-producer on it, sort of an overseer of the physical production. It's Rob's baby. His creative baby, and it's really it's a psychological thriller. It's about a couple going through a struggle to conceive and
Hmm.
sort of put together the perfect home, and there seems to be this sort of overseeing entity that's making sure that they're on time, and following the rules, or something bad's going to happen. And it's
Gotcha.
it's cool. And, it's very well acted. And it was all shot in one location. We shot it last year in the summer before I had trying to think of what point I shot it. It was right before I either left to come home to Massachusetts or no, actually, I remember it was we shot that and then I went out and I think I went to Film Quest and did like a whole room. I remember that. But anyway, that's going to be coming out later this year. It's probably going to go through the festival circuit first, look for distribution, and then hopefully we can get it on a streaming service at some point and have that be one of the first Womp Stomp productions to go right through to a streaming channel rather than having to go to the YouTube channel, which you'll see some, like a lot of the features that we're working on is that avenue. But we are working on short films to try and get them for the channel as well. So I would say anyone looking for original content, look for the EMF crowdfunding campaign. I would say in the spring of next year will be when we launch it, and that will be a live action production that I'm directing, hopefully out here in Massachusetts. That's going to be really, really cool. It's about a ghost hunter that gets locked in a room with a bunch of ghosts, and it is scary as hell. It's inspired by Tales from the Crypt television terror episode with Morton Downey Jr. It's one of my favorite sort of episodes of Tales from the Crypt. It's creeped me out as a kid. So there's a lot of parallels for as far as like what I was going for in that sense. Not the way Martin Downey Jr. acts or anything like that, but the fact that someone's inside with a camera. It has a lot of Never Hike Alone style camera work, where it's somebody with a GoPro and also being filmed third-person narrative. So I'd say there's, even for the modern audiences, it's got a little bit of Hell House, in there as well, as far as like, having someone with a camera, having things happening in the moment and seeing somebody reacting to those things in the moment, with cool twists. But that's going to be a short film, probably 20 minutes long. A lot of cool little moments in it. And I'm hoping to get that into the circuit next fall.
Heck yeah. Awesome. So yeah, stuff is still building for you guys. The Fragment, I just started following Fragment's Instagram, and I had to ask you about it.
Yeah, definitely follow it. We will be sharing it and things like that. So definitely follow it to keep up specifically with the updates on that project as it develops.
Yeah, because I'm at the point, I think, like a lot of people here in the chat, where it's kind of like, well, whatever you got going on, just lead and we'll follow. Like, I'll give anything a shot if you're a part of it, because I just respect you're one of the most hardworking guys I've ever met. And I know that it's a different kind of work because it's work in the creative field. So, some people, I think it can be difficult to quantify sometimes, but you just like, and I've never worked on a film or anything. I've worked in music production and stuff like that. But, when you're actually in there setting up mics, setting everything up and going through the process, you realize, you can spend 12 hours on a creative project and it feels like you've only been doing it for like 4 until you get completely dead ass tired. But at the beginning, you got all this energy and you're like, oh, it doesn't, it is work, but sometimes it doesn't feel like work. And, there are times when, it absolutely feels like work. Let's see here. What we got? Allie Girl wants you to take over Halloween. She wants you to fix Halloween.
I mean, I just want to put Stephen Wolf in charge of a good Halloween-inspired fan film. He did The Face of Michael Myers. I really thought that was a good concept. It had a lot of room to expand. It would have been very bloody and gory. That was a prelude that we released online. It wasn't necessarily time to start killing people. We wish we did have the budget to go and do that. Probably would have helped with the crowdfund at that point. We did do Happy Halloween with Cortland Gordon and don't know why I'm forgetting his name. But Cortland was really like kind of like the real mastermind behind it anyway. And he did a great job, putting together a lot with just very little. I think that's one of the best things he does, is that he works with very little resources and he makes it look like he's got a lot. And he executes so well, and his stuff is just so energetic and full of life. So I really had enjoyed working with him. So like Cortland, Steven, and I would love to come back and play Michael. I love playing Michael. I think it's sort of like Michael is the set dressing of slashers to me, in the sense of like, it's not like being Jason, where you have to put on an entire like Iron Man costume in order to like get into character and do all these things. Like Michael is a very simple costume, and then it's a challenge to play him, but it's comfortable. It's a comfortable day on set as an actor to be like, hey, I'm going to be in a jumpsuit all day. Yeah. I'm going to have just one mask that I pull on and off. Like I don't have to wear a lot of makeup. Like I'll just wear some stuff to darken around the eyes, so you don't get a lot of skin bounce. Put some dirt on my hands. But other than that, like I'm completely clean. If it's a hot day out, I'm in shorts underneath. If it is a
really
a cold
nothing.
day, I can. Yeah, right. If it's a cold day out, I can wear long johns. Yeah. Or I can wear a jacket in between things and stay warm. And I don't have silicone like freezing me to death. So it's really fun for me to do that. I like playing Michael. I have a very interesting take on how I get there to that space of just sort of emptying out your head and getting into a void and just sort of focusing on, okay, I've chosen this person to kill them, and they're going to die. and sort of going through it without, it's not like Jason like marching after somebody and doing all this stuff. It's just so calculated, and there's not Michael doesn't worry. He doesn't worry if you're going to get away, because he's going to catch up eventually and he's going to get you. And so he's not going to fret about it. He's not going to get nervous. He's just, okay, that way's done. I'm going to go that way. And just like, I don't know, it's a really cool mindset to be in. Yeah. And a lot of fun to play.
And Michael is sort of, I've always thought, it's like Jimmy, random. Yeah. It's like random who he wants to kill and who he just lets go. Even in part 2, he goes into the Elrod's house and all he wants is their knife, and then to listen to the news report about himself, and then he bounces out of there. Like, he could have killed those 2 people, but he just doesn't, and he goes next.
Well, if it was Halloween Kills, he would have.
Yeah, he definitely would have. Yeah, and I mean, even that version of Michael doesn't kill the baby in 2018. He seemingly just sort of, it's like he looks at something and he's like, yeah, I'm interested in that, or just like, and walks away.
It's interesting.
He's fascinating.
The baby thing is interesting. The fact that like he wouldn't think to kill a baby, but he'll kill everybody else. So what? Like, it almost says that he has a conscience in a way.
Yeah, or they're
like honestly, they should have just cut outside and you just hear glass breaking and the baby just splats onto the sidewalk. Like, that seems to be what Michael would have done.
Well, but or is it like, does he just only care if the person's in his way, or in between him and what he wants? Because he kills the 13 or 14-year-old kid in the car in 2018, but the kid's in the car and he needs the car, so there's like a little bit of reasoning there, But yeah, he just seemingly, I mean, in Kills, he is absolutely killing everybody except for Tivoli.
Yeah.
The darkest, like, that's the thing about Kills is there's so much in there to enjoy. I love so much about that movie. I think it's got a great soundtrack. I think all those movies look great and sound great. Like, production wise, everyone knocked it out of the park as far as putting together great looking films that are consistent in that way. But yeah, it just seems like there are these certain times when they get distracted from what they're doing, and it's those times where I'm like, why'd you do that? Like, I want the darkness in a Halloween movie to come from Michael, not from the crowd in the hospital making a mental patient jump to his death. I was like, man, that's like real life bummer. I wanted like a slasher kind of thing, not this real life bummer.
Yeah, I know. I know exactly what you mean. It's sort of, it was trying to get into a subject matter that like we didn't really tune in for. That's not why we were there. And, that's the filmmaker's prerogative to do whatever they want. But like, I think they handled that storyline better in part 4, where there was a roaming mob, but you just saw them in glimpses. And yeah, they shot somebody they weren't supposed to, but they didn't spend 20 minutes of the movie like harking that and shoving it down your throat. Yeah. You got it. Like, we don't need that much story time to get what you're trying to say. Like, when you do that, you're trying, like, that's an instance where I'd say like that's where the filmmaker is telling the audience that they're stupid. Keep paying attention, stupid. You're gonna get it yet? Did you get it yet? Oh wait, we're gonna keep making you get it. And then it's like, yeah, I get it. I move on. Get back to Michael. Why am I still watching this? This? Like, how are they confusing the fucking penguin from Tim Burton's Batman Returns as Michael Myers? They showed him on the screen. Everyone knows what Michael Myers' face looked. That guy looks nothing like Michael Myers. How could you confuse that dude for Michael Myers? And, obviously, like, that's the issue with mob mentality. But how does a film that was made, way back in the 80s, Halloween Part 4, do it better when they simply just have somebody mistakenly shoot somebody else, or they have them mistakenly run over Ben Tramer? Like, that's how those things should work.
They linger a bit too long.
And if you linger on it too long, you start to lose people. And that's really what it comes down to. I thought, same thing with like, Halloween Ends will be its own episode, really.
Do we have enough time to talk about Halloween?
I don't know. I don't think we do.
I don't think anyone does.
No, I think that, it is what it is. But I think that I would fully admit that, listen, I would love to take over Friday the 13th. I feel like that's something I'd feel comfortable stepping into there right now. They're like, it's $1 billion, whatever, a $750 million, property for a studio. If they said, Vin, we're going to hand you the keys to this thing tomorrow, I wouldn't hesitate. because I know exactly what I would want to do with it. I've worked in the studio system before. I'm not scared of it. I understand how it works and I understand how to get things done. Like that wouldn't be a problem. And then I would have the wherewithal to say like, hey, Vin, we want you to do Halloween. And I would say, I'll help you with Halloween.
Sure.
I'll be a creative consultant on Halloween. I'll be in there, but you need to find somebody who understands Halloween like I understand Friday the 13th. And you need to put them in the helm. And that's the reason why I got involved with, Dylan's New Nightmare. I can't tell you all the things that I can tell you about Friday the 13th with, Nightmare on Elm Street, especially, New Nightmare. I mean, I saw it a couple times before we went into it, but I knew and I could recognize in Cecil that there was a passion there to tell a story that was real. It wasn't surface level. It made sense. And when he pitched me like, yeah, you bring back Nico Hughes to reprise his role and he's that person as an adult, I'm like, that's a story. That's a pitch that if I was at a studio and I was, listening to pitches for Nightmare on Elm Street, I'd say that's a great streaming series. I would watch that streaming series. I don't think that's where you take a new movie because everybody wants the real Freddy to come back. I don't think you roll all your dice on Wes Craven's New Nightmare for a new feature thing, but a TV show, hell yeah. You know what I mean? Like you put that on IFC or Shudder or, something of that ilk where you give it a decent budget. You're not putting too much into it where the fact that like you're betting all the marbles, but you're going to get something that's going to give you a good production. And then in return, you're going to get an interesting story because there's a natural story to be told. Yeah. The think of like bringing Heather Langenkamp back in and having her reprise a role and have her carry that on in that same universe. In fact, if you want to bring back Robert Englund into the Nightmare on Elm Street world, you have him play himself as somebody who is not going to play Freddy anymore.
Yeah,
but now this entity still sees him as Freddy. You know what I mean? Like, and so Cecil has a lot of really great ideas that if he had a studio backing him, that there would be money to go to Heather and go to Robert and say, we want you to bring these characters back, and there's a reason why we're bringing it back, and here's how the story goes, and it's going to be this. There's plenty of legs there. And I think that as a producer, I could totally recognize those things in people. And I can hear like my sense and what I do well is I know how to tell a story. And I know what components need to be there for a story to work in order to, get the audience excited or what they're expecting to see. The lore and things I would struggle with. I think in some other series, I know Michael pretty well, and I do know Freddy enough that I would feel comfortable in a room pitching. But there were things I learned from Cecil. There are things that I learned from Steven. There are things that I learned from Cortland. And about these different characters, and it's interesting to me, and I like playing that role too. Even within Friday the 13th, when James was really focused on like telling something from the Final Chapter world. I love Final Chapter and I know it very, very well, but again, it was his vision, it was his story, and so my job was just to say, anytime it started to go off the tracks of saying you're not even following your own story. Yeah. That's what I'm there for. I'm very good at recognizing that and then helping people stay on path and be like, no, you're setting this up and this up. So you want to go one of these three different directions, or else you got to change a decision that's made back here because now you're making a different character and keeping consistency. And that was one of my first jobs in animation, was doing that. I was a story editorial coordinator, a story coordinator, director's assistant, writing assistant. And so it was my job to do the notes and keep an eye out for these things. And it taught me how to build stories and what to keep an eye out for and not look at, stories from a very, sequence by sequence basis, but be able to zoom back out and see the big picture and understand that, something that's going on in the first act is going to pay off in the third act, or these are the breadcrumbs that are sprinkled out throughout the second act that remain consistent with the choices that the character is going to make, that that will sit well with an audience, that when they go back and they put up the entire equation and they run the math through their minds themselves, they go like, okay, yeah, it makes sense that a character did that. Because how many times have we been an audience member and watched a film and been like, wait, like they're this person in this scene, but then they do this in another scene? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. And not to say that human, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think a big part of, success in filmmaking and, as far as how fans are going to feel about things is putting the right people in charge. So, you're able to recognize that when other people have got the lore with another character down and you're like, well, yeah, let me help you out with the story. Because I think, the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy was pretty successful as far as you know, at least bringing Michael back for a little bit and giving us a Michael that was, because I guess for me, Halloween movies, it's like if the interpretation of Michael doesn't work, then I'm like, I just don't even really care. So like Halloween 5, I have a tough time watching it because Michael looks terrible. Even Halloween 4, which a lot of people celebrate, that mask just really throws me off. But you know, putting him in charge of The Exorcist after Halloween, I'm just sort of like, it just seems like maybe that wasn't the right call. And so really it's like what we need, or even Ryan Johnson getting to do The Last Jedi, like these things where it's like, why did these decisions get made? Like, why didn't JJ do that whole trilogy? It would have been so, even if The Force Awakens is a soft reboot, that trilogy, he wouldn't have to come in the third movie and try to make sense of like what Ryan Johnson did. So it's like, that's what we need in filmmaking, is sort of, you know, people like yourself that know where they belong and they know where other people belong too. Like, hey, I'm not the right guy for that job entirely, but I will oversee that whole thing and make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I think the number one thing I would say is like when you're, you know, especially with something like a Halloween or anything that like a Star Wars, anything like that, if you're going to do 3 films, well, you better walk into my office with 3 scripts.
Yeah. Yes.
And I want to read them all the way through. And we're going to sit there for months going through these scripts beat by beat, you know, note card by note card. I work on note cards. I think note cards are the greatest thing. When you can sit back in a room and you can see an entire movie up on a wall, up on note cards, and you can talk about it, and you can pitch through it, and you act out every scene, you and the directors and, you know, the storyboard artists and all the people that are involved in that core process of making a film, which is one of the most fun things in the world. You work everything out. And then as you develop and you make it and things change, everything's built to move. Everything's built to adjust. You know the things that connect to the other things. So you're not like ruining something for another movie. You're actually either amplifying or changing in a way that's going to make it better. You know, constantly trying to make it better. But you're always working towards a final finite end goal that is set up through all 3 films. And, you know, I think that, you know, one of the things that I see a lot happen in film is you'll see 3 or 4 different writers on something, which I think a lot of the times 3 or 4 different writers means 3 or 4 different voices. And that's really tough to, you know, start to kind of put it all in one singular voice. Like I can hear in Halloween when who plays Kenny Powers?
When Danny McBride wrote the dialogue.
Like I can tell when Danny McBride was writing. I could tell when somebody else was writing. I can tell in Halloween Ends when one of the 3 writers was writing a specific scene, because there were things that made sense in certain scenes together, but not in other scenes. But other scenes made sense, but they didn't make sense with the other scenes. And everybody sort of had different ideas. And they even said it that like, oh, we would go in and we'd have 3 different ideas and we'd pick the best one. The problem is that sometimes those ideas are based on other parts of the script that they also want to write, but didn't win. You know what I mean? So they lost in those scenes. So some of the things that would have set up the things that they're trying to set up are not there. You know, it's just, and that's what I was talking about, like a sequential view of the film, making sure each scene is cool. You know, it works for the scene, but how does it work in context of a bigger structure? How does it work in context of the film? How does it work in context of the franchise? How does it work in context of this specific trilogy? You know, these characters. And there were a lot of definitely, like, using Halloween Ends as an example, it was just there's a lot of different things that didn't make a lot of sense. You know, like how does Jamie Lee Curtis go from the most paranoid person in the world to then having her daughter murdered in town, have the killer get away, and now she's the one who sleeps with her doors unlocked?
Yeah.
She's just letting go. She's just wait.
They should have almost like flipped those, right? Like we should have gotten a Laurie that's more reminiscent of 78, and that should have been in the 2018 film. She's trying to move on, and her trust gets completely destroyed by the fact that Michael escapes and comes back, and yada yada yada. Yeah, I mean it's I think, whenever you see a handful of writers, it's like, oh, crap. So the first person or first 2 people that wrote this didn't do that good of a job because they had to bring in 2 or 3 other people. And then like you're saying, if you're going to map out a trilogy, if you're going to withhold something from one movie, then there's a good reason why you're withholding it, because you're going to reveal it later. So it's like to go back to Star Wars, like you don't want to, even though he didn't have Darth Vader planned as Luke's father, even if he knew that information at the time, you wouldn't want to reveal it in the first movie. Like you do want to like everything should be done with some sort of purpose. There should be, you know, some sort of drive that, or it drives the story, it drives the characters, and it makes sense. Yeah, and I think that is one of the things, like with Ends, I really like Ends, but I guess that, you know, because I knew that that huge curveball was coming, with Corey being kind of taking the mantle, I was sort of ready for something completely different. So I think if you go in there with that mindset, maybe you enjoy the film more. But yeah, it is definitely a departure. And I completely understand why people don't like it. Like
Yeah.
there's tons of hate out there for it, and it's like, well, hey, that doesn't change the fact that I enjoy it. But every time I rewatch a movie, it's almost like reforming your opinion. You know, anytime I go back to a movie, I'm sort of like looking at it from a different lens, and I try to be as well educated of a fan and audience member as I can be, without being in the industry myself. But you know, you just kind of, you know, as a fan, I think you can get smarter just by paying attention and talking
Yeah,
to
but
people
I
that
think
do make
that you
films.
shouldn't have to be a member of the industry to understand a movie. If
Sure.
that's what
Yeah.
it requires, then you're in big trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's got to be so simple. And I think that that's the hardest part is like getting over the, you know, the complexity of it to go back and make it simple and
Yeah.
to keep it simple.
Well,
And, you know, that's what the original Halloween is. The original Halloween is very simple, that Laurie happened to be the girl who walked by the Myers house that day, and Myers got fixated on her. You know, and if they wanted to make her the sister in part two, that's fine with me. Like it makes even more sense. Okay, he's going after the other person in his family member that's still out there, and he wants to put
yeah.
them in the grave. And so you get that combination of it. But it's again, it's simplicity, and it doesn't take too much of an explanation. You know what I mean? Like the reveal of Laurie being Michael's sister in part two, like that wasn't. I know John Carpenter hates his own script for that one, but it wasn't a bad idea. Like it was done very quickly and easy. It didn't like take like all like it didn't take 20 scenes to get to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It all made sense in the end. There were three different things. And even in, you know, John Carpenter working at what he feels is the most diminished capacity, you know, drinking a 6-pack every night and writing the Halloween 2 script, you know, that's still better than what a lot of the efforts were that came after it. That's
Sure.
for sure. Which
Yeah.
did get convoluted, which did go in, like when, you know, you got Paul Rudd explaining runes to you in the 6th film.
Oh my
You
gosh.
know,
That
you're all over the place.
I like
Trapping Michael in the runes. I was just like, you gotta
Yeah.
be kidding me.
I've got a soft spot for Curse for a few reasons, but really it's just that producer's cut, which I didn't even own until maybe like 8-9 years ago or something. Yeah, because that theatrical cut, for some reason they have Tommy Doyle doing the narration at the beginning. In the producer's cut, it's Donald Pleasance. I'm like, they made these odd changes in the theatrical, like the version that went out there. The producer's cut feels a little more like the original film where they have slower tracking shots. They just take a little more time. But yeah, that Paul Rudd, like when Michael Myers was 6 years old, that like mid-Atlantic like accent that no one's ever had. I mean, maybe that's why he doesn't want to come back to the franchise. Or I know he's kind of poo-pooed it in interviews where he's like, I was in Halloween something, I don't even know what it was. And I'm like, man, if you came back though, Paul, even if you just went to a convention, dude, if he went to H50, everyone would freak out. They would love to get their Tommy stuff. I think that's what H45 taught me, is no matter what people say online or think about these movies, like when it comes down to it, they still love them. Like they still love that they exist. Like even if you're going to tear apart one of them, it's like, well, I'm happy we have it rather than not. To go back to Friday the 13th, there are people who Part 5 is their favorite. There are people who hate Part 5, but probably still put it on once a year or whenever Friday the 13th rolls around. So, so maybe we will get that Roy resurrection.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always the immediate reaction, and then there's the long-term reaction. And over time, you know, emotions sort of simmer, and then you watch it under a different light, or like a new movie comes out and it's no longer the last thing that you had to watch. So now it just exists. You know, I honestly thought that like Halloween Ends really could have been something special. I think there were opportunities there for it to really kind of work. And in fact, I would say that Stephen Wolf had David Gordon Green beat by about 5 years, because he had something very similar for that, for The Face of Michael Myers, about Michael Myers in that world actually being gone, but still living through other people, and still that evil still persists in Haddonfield. And what people perceived as Michael Myers was still out there.
Gotcha.
And it was infecting other people, and other people were killing, and that it was changing its shape and
Yeah.
just like they did in the film. And so it was funny when it came out. I kind of laughed with Steven about it. I was like, they stole your idea, which is totally possible. Who knows? But that was where we wanted to go with it. But we wanted to do our spin of it. And honestly, like now that Halloween Ends has happened, I think I would go as far to basically not rip Ends off, but do what Ends should have done to kind of like get the story in to set the story up, because I think Halloween's in its biggest mistake missed an opportunity with the way that horror changed shape in that movie, the way that evil changed shape in that movie. I thought the execution of it was very clunky, and because it was the most important part of the movie, that transition of it's your turn, and they really made it really goofy. Like it just was goofy to me. Like they look into each other's eyes and they recognize that they're both evil. I'm like,
It's
you
like
gotta be
total
kidding
eclipse
me.
of the heart plays. Or
Yeah,
something.
they really. I mean, honestly, there's got to be some kind of super cut of that happening where it's just like lovers fall in love, and like just
Yeah.
something like it's gonna be Happy Gilmore singing. I want to touch you all over.
Dun 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 till the night closes in.
Yeah, and they're just holding each
Yeah.
other, and that's how Corey became evil. I thought it got.
It-
I just thought it was very just like again, like the tonal shift of who Corey was changed so much, because he still was so much of himself, but then he was like one for one Myers. And
Yeah.
it was like, did he completely get taken over? Is he half taken over? How's he dealing with it? How's he feel about this? Like, he just
Yeah.
seems to be like, yeah, this is just me now. This is just me now. This is cool. Nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong here. You know what I mean? It was very like casual. And I thought that there was something more that could have been there. So I don't know. I'll talk to Steve and see if he still wants to do Face, because I think that Face would be such a rad short to do.
I do like that idea of that, like maybe Haddonfield is just a place where, evil for whatever reason just resides happily, and yeah, that the evil can basically embody somebody or take somebody over. I do like that for sure.
Well, I remember that like in the Halloween, in the original novel, I believe that there's a prologue or there's something about, them talking about Michael kind of going through this phase before he killed his sister. That was like, there were a couple red flags that he was hearing voices that, there was something going on. He felt like something was trying to take him over, and then it did. And so if that exists in Haddonfield, or it just exists somewhere in the world, and, I think the best way to always explain it is to look at, the way Stephen King, explains, Derry, Maine, or, some of the other places in his films where there's just something about it. You don't go into the, you don't go into the deep thing of like, well, it's the way the dirt mixed with some magical liquid back in the day. It's like, no, it's just, this is the way it's always been. We can't explain it, but it just is. And this is what happens here. You know what I mean? And like Pet Sematary is another great example of that. Like the ground is sour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that, again, simple and you get it. Yeah.
Keeping the mystery alive, especially for a character like Michael. Like we were saying, with Jason, you wear all that stuff, you get to be a little more like brutal and over the top with his strength, whereas Michael is a more mysterious character that is quasi supernatural. So he has strength, but he doesn't need to be too emotive about it. That's what I think. There's something like the more I watch, especially the original Halloween, the older I get, I think I find it scarier, because I'm like, this is actually as close to what real serial killers do. They watch people. Like the BTK. I watched something about him. He would sit there. He had like a notebook of all these people that were his potentials, and he would start following these people. And just like, if he got inspired, he went for him. If not, he didn't. And I'm like, that's kind of like the vibe I get from early Michael, is just sort of watching and waiting for the perfect time to strike. And he doesn't even have to be that. He's like a regular man. And I think that's what, especially like when the Rob Zombie movies came out, you can say there's a whole bunch of issues going on there with just the writing and or the dialogue itself and all that. But having a 6'8" Michael is sort of, to me, defeats the purpose of Michael Myers. I mean, Tyler Mane does a great job performing the role. He's given a job and he did what he could do with it. But when Michael's breaking through like oak doors, like the Kool-Aid Man
It's
or
very
something,
Jason.
yeah, and I'm also just like, so why should I be scared of you? Because there's no point. I might as well just give up and let you kill me. Like, it's the same way with like fast zombies versus slow zombies. I like slow zombies because they represent that death is going to get you no matter what. Board up the windows, lock the doors. It's going to take like, a couple hundred of those things. They'll push through and they'll get you.
Yeah, but
Whereas
those
fast
running
zombies,
zombies will get your heart rate up. That's for sure.
yeah, but it's just like, why would I even try? I wouldn't even. I'd be like, well, I guess if they're running, I'm
Like,
I'm
I'm screwed.
done. Like, I'll just
Yeah,
stay.
right. I'm
I'll
gonna
just,
pull a hammy.
yeah, I'll just hang out and let it happen. Yeah. So
Yeah,
let's
I know.
see here.
There's definitely like. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just scrolling through.
No, I was just gonna say about like with Michael. I feel like what it is. It's like I said. Like for me, I go to a place where it's a void, where he doesn't feel emotion, he doesn't feel empathy, he doesn't feel pain. Like it's all just. He's just like an operating system that has a very like the minimal amount of energy it takes to get his body to move and make decisions is what's going on inside of him. There's not like any sort of stream of consciousness. There's nothing. He's just so empty behind his eyes that it's just there. It's just, and then like, it's almost like a Terminator turning on you and then being like, target selected, like you said, with BTK. And all of a sudden that minimalistic machine turns onto you, the evil, where it's endless, timeless evil, where it's just like, I've chosen you, I've marked you for death, and now I start the slow march to come after you.
Yeah. He's like
And
Jaws.
And yeah, I mean, very much. And, it's Michael but the thing about Michael, although you got to say this, is Michael has a sense of humor. Like when he puts on the ghost costume to go in, he puts the glasses on, and there's something there about him, like
childlike.
That's like he's messing with the victims, that he's giving them a false sense of security, that there's a little bit of something there, but it's sort of like, again, it's in the moment inspired, but he never really did anything else like that in the series, did he?
Well, in part 5, he dresses up as the other Michael, the nerdy guy that for some reason is like a greaser tough guy. He's like the scrawniest guy ever that's a complete jerk to his girlfriend. And yeah, it's really odd because his name's Michael too. So when Tina gets in the car, she's like, Michael, stop it. And it's really Don Shank's wide open eyes looking through that. I think it's the Brute Man. Yeah. Yeah, it's just really unsettling. And I guess he's got that mask. He takes it off at one point and puts his other mask on, before driving off. But yeah, there's a few times where it's almost like this, like feigning innocence kind of thing, where he's like, childlike innocence. But yeah, like you said, you're marked for death once he decides. That's pretty much it with Michael. And so another thing I wanted to mention, I dress up.
I'm always
as Michael.
thinking of Loomis, where he's like, they were the devil's eyes.
Yeah.
And then you cut to like one of those shots. I've seen that meme too, where it's like him at the end of H2O, where he's like, you can just see his eyes in the mask, like, please don't kill me. And then H2O, they have like the bait and switch.
Man, that one's rough. And there are some people that really love it. I get it. I was 16 when that came out. I went to the theater. I really enjoyed it because at the time it was cool to see Jamie Lee come back. That was something that wasn't happening in slashers. And of course, it was just the first time I saw a Halloween film in the theater. But the more and more I watch H2O, I mean, the mask issues are huge. There's hardly anything going on after the first act. The first act has some great character development with Laurie, and I really like Adam Arkin, who plays her boyfriend. I love all that in the first act. I love all the stuff with Josh Hartnett in the first act. He's trying to find his place. He thinks his mom's crazy, and then it just seems like they don't care from there on out. Like, maybe it's a Steve Miner thing where it's just like, don't think about it. And it's like, well, Steve, maybe you do need to think about using a good mask, man. Because
I don't think that wasn't on him though. That was like, I remember that they ran into a bunch of issues. In fact, I knew somebody who was working at Miramax at the time, who told me stories about this, about like literally Weinstein was like putting a different mask in like every scene. Like every day they had like a new mask.
Yeah.
And they just kept putting it in, and they kept doing some stuff. And so there was a lot of like behind the scenes there's definitely a lot of like things going on behind the scenes of that movie that did not help the final outcome, and that's
Yeah.
really where I think a lot of films go to die, is that, you know, the behind the scenes drama, the behind the scenes influence, the people who shouldn't have as much creative say in the movie but impede their own will into the films are
Hmm.
usually what knocks them off the tracks, you know.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up with things like producers cuts and directors cuts and things like that, that,
Yeah.
you know, the visions aren't aligned, and, you know, that's, and everyone's trying to do their job but they're being told to do two different things, you know what I mean? So um I would, that's what's going on. And I think a lot of people wonder why, like, how could it happen? But, you know, films are just as susceptible to bad teams and, you know, bad teamwork behind the scenes. And even though it's your favorite franchise and they're like, you will defend these characters to the death, like the people who are working on it, like, created issues. And now
Hmm.
you as a fan are stuck with that movie for the rest of your life with a CG mask
Yeah.
that no one ever asked for. So it's very weird.
And business
That,
decisions that instead of creative
yeah.
decisions, instead of, you know, a producer, clearly they put in their money, they feel like they've got that right, you know, when you get to that level. But also it's like you need to hire somebody that you trust so you can take a step back and let them do their damn job. You know, it's, you have to find that, you know, that spot right between. You don't want to
Hmm.
be overseeing too hardcore and, yeah, end up to where there's that dreadful K&B alien mask, which is probably worse. It might even be worse than the CG mask. I always call it the Keanu, that one shot. He's like, I know
Yeah.
kung fu.
Yeah. Ugh.
But my favorite is the mask in the very first scene because it's the curse mask. And say all you want about curse, I think that mask does have some pretty good looks depending on the lighting, and it's easily the most unsettling mask they had in that
Mhm.
film. But unfortunately, it's only in the first scene, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see here. We got Kevin Dustin says certain fan films are just on another level. I agree, Kevin. It's Me Billy 2 starts filming this coming week. Never Hike Alone and It's Me Billy have really changed the game. Yeah, I think we're seeing, yeah, they're loading up trucks with all sorts of gear for It's Me Billy Chapter 2, and you know those guys are taking their work really seriously too, just like you guys do over at Womp Stomp.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, you know, Dave's got the background in it. And, you know, that's what I was saying. Like with Dylan, I mean, yeah, with Dylan's, it's amazing that like we had all those people in the room, like Miko, Dave, me,
mhm.
Cecil, you know, Ben coming in and doing multiple Womp Stomp projects, doing 13 Fanboy, and Bone Cold, and, you know, up in Maine before. Like it's really cool. The
Mhm.
fact that that team together, and, you know, it's nice to sit down with other filmmakers and, you know, talk to Dave at length about, you know, Billy and where it's going and stuff like that. So we all know what we're all doing behind the scenes. We've all
Yeah.
talked about our projects. We've pitched them to each other, and we've all championed each other. So, and it's nice when, you know, it's almost like, you know, we went out and we put our boat in the water and we went out to sea and we came back with our bounty and we came back with our movie. And now my friend is loading up his ship and he's setting out into his own journey.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, I wish Dave the best and the team, and, you know, they do a really great job up there. You know, it's unfortunate that, you know, Olivia Hussey had to step away from the project, but, you know, like a true professional, Dave was ready to jump on it. They ended up finding somebody to, like, one for one looks just like her too. So
Yeah, really
it's
good
kind of a,
likeness, and I trust those guys. I'm, you
yeah.
know,
And yeah, and she'll deliver the performance. You know they'll get it out of her. And so it's nice that, you know, Dave is getting the opportunity to finish his story, and that, you know, at the end of the day, fan films, these are the films that the studios never would have made.
yeah.
No one was putting in the effort.
I,
And so when
I,
people get mad at fan films for doing this, they have no reason to, because we, at least we care.
yeah.
At least we cared enough to give it a shot to do what we all wished the studios would do. And this isn't stopping the studios from doing it. It should just show that, like,
Yeah.
fans' ideas and things that we're calling out are worth making. And if they had even more money, they'd be even better.
Yeah. And it proves that there's still an audience out there. And I mean, especially for Friday the 13th, I can't believe they haven't made one since '09. I mean, even, you know, I would have had one out like the very next year if I, you know, were a part of that team. But then, like with Black Christmas, it's, you know, we're coming up on 50 years of Black Christmas. It is such an effective film. And I mean, it's definitely a film of its time, you know, early to mid 70s, 74, I think it came out originally.
Mm-hmm.
But man, there is the creep factor in that movie is really, really high. The stuff that Billy
Mm-hmm.
says on the phone, I can't watch the movie when my wife is around because she can't deal with the
The
voice and the
voice.
things that he says. And then even when I put on It's Me Billy, Dave I think is doing the Billy voice on the phone in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, same kind of thing. She's like, I can't do this, so she had to
Mm-hmm.
leave. She had to leave the room.
Yeah, it really takes like, Black Christmas um, really took the when a stranger calls concept and really
Mhm.
took it to that next level. The killers in the house is something that was, it's been around for a little bit, but they took it to that next level of actually eliminating people and doing that beyond just that, which I thought was, obviously genius
Mhm.
on that part. But the only thing Black Christmas has been able to muster ever since, there's like two very
Really weird.
remakes. Yeah, just
Yeah,
both of them are very odd, like the yellow skinned Billy and Black Xmas, and then whatever they did with, I still haven't seen the new one. I've
I
just
haven't
been like
either.
afraid to watch it.
Yeah.
It doesn't look good. Nothing about it really appeals to me.
Why
I
is it?
don't think it was, I don't know why it was made for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I don't think,
Why
as
is
of
it called
like,
Black Christmas? I'm like, this has nothing to do. It
because
has
it will
nothing
get
to do.
people in the theater.
Like the only
It's
thing
the
it
only
has
reason.
in
It's because it
common
will get people in the theater.
is college. It takes place at a college. That's the only thing. And then it seems like the '06 that Black Xmas is it sort of like a I haven't even seen that one. Is it kind of like a remake slash sequel? Is it sort of both? I mean, does it because it kind of
No,
built
it
it
no, it's
takes
no, it's a remake. It's a complete remake from the
uh,
scratch. It just retells the story with
skin
kids getting
cookies.
killed at the on a college campus. But I don't know. It sounded like it wasn't like what the original was all about at all.
Hmm.
Let me see what else. Who else is throwing
Yeah.
questions at us? Uh,
I see Mitch says, I rather agree that the slasher subgenre needs some kind of creative invigoration. Well, Mitch, I don't know if you've seen Thanksgiving yet. I
I'm
don't know
looking
if
forward to
you'd,
seeing Thanksgiving.
yeah, and I don't know if you'd consider it creative invigoration, but I would say it's like Eli Roth took the highest level college course on how to make a slasher. He did his homework, he studied, and he put together an A plus final project because it's a complete love letter to movies like My Bloody Valentine and The Prowler.
Mm.
There's the Visceral Nation or Nation, a Visceral. That's a cool band name. We are Visceral Nation. The visceral nature of the kills, very similar to what Savini was doing back then in the '80s, and it's
Hmm.
got that revenge slash whodunit kind of aspect. I
Yep.
know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's a return to '90s horror," and I'm like, "Oh, well, you can tell who's under 35 because they think it's '90s horror." I mean, there's certain elements, but whodunit horror was existed in the '80s too, so I get way more of that My Bloody
And before then
Valentine.
as well. I mean, Giallo was really
Sure.
like, was another whodunit. Hitchcock was doing whodunits. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
a whodunit has been around for a long time. It's one of the longest running sort of subgenres of films, really.
Yeah.
Um, but I think like where they get the '90s style is, I think, is it has a '90s aesthetic. Is it doesn't have that like, oh, it's a classic '80s. It's
Hmm.
got a little bit more of a slick production value. That's why
Yes.
it will remind people of an urban legend, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, where I was talking to somebody about this today, that the '90s really sort of made an effort to ground their characters even a little bit more.
Hmm.
They put a little bit more effort into the characters. I just think that the '90s were sort of running out of ideas, and then Wes Craven swept everybody off their feet with Scream, and sort of like made the anti-slasher slasher. So then
Hmm.
it became uncool to do a slasher in a way. But now, Eli's come back around and really started to help breathe life into it. Obviously, probably all starts with Halloween coming back and really bringing back the birth of the slasher. We've had Texas Chainsaw movie, and
Hmm.
yeah, the fact that we haven't had a Friday the 13th is really ridiculous. The fact that the studios couldn't come up with something after 2009, they had a remake. Sequel to the remake that was written by the same writers that they passed on. They had a found footage one that they passed on, but then they turned it into a 3D movie that they passed on that. And then they did one more attempt at doing like a whole retelling of the entire story by Breck Eisner, and that fell apart in 2017. And then, for those of you who don't know, Obviously, Paramount created the series. Then it went to New Line in 1993, and then in 2008, New Line had it, and they traded rights. Warner Brothers traded rights with Paramount for the rights to Interstellar, and so they made Interstellar, and in that deal, Friday the 13th went back to Paramount because Michael Bay's company, Platinum Dunes, which was run by Brad Fuller and Andrew Forum, they were big Friday the 13th fans, and they wanted to make a Jason movie. And so they were like, give us this. And Platinum Dunes got it. They were making them for $20 million a piece. They made the first one, but then that formula, they held onto it as the production company. But everything that happened in Paramount after that was there was like a new regime in every other year. And so every time the new regime changed, they'd come in, they'd look at Friday the 13th and be like, no, we're not doing that. And they'd switch the regime, and then they'd try something else. And then a new regime would come in and they'd do the same exact thing. And then it came down to in 2017, they were going to do Breck Eisner's version. They were literally painting cabins in Georgia at where they filmed Part 6. They were going to do it at the same camp Daniel Morgan. And what ended up happening was somebody at Warner Brothers said, or somebody at Paramount said, like, listen, we're going to make this movie. It's going to come out. It could be a huge hit. And then guess what? Warner Brothers gets the rights back next year because our lease is only up for 10 years. So now we're going to have to renegotiate the lease. So why are we going to create a hit for Warner Brothers when we should just let it die in the vine and let them get it back and figure it out? And that's what they did. And then by the time it got back to Warner Brothers, the lawsuit started. And then that just started, and that just kept up the bad luck for the franchise, and it just so happened in 2017, a bunch of like upstart filmmakers decided to make Never Hike Alone, and that came out, and it didn't do the same impact that a feature film would have across the world, but it started something. And, and that's why we're here talking about stuff today, is because, the fans of Friday the 13th are out there and are so fed up, many of us stood up and said, well, we'll just do it ourselves.
Yeah. Well, good on you guys for doing that. I think it just shows that, that audience is there, and that horror fans, we're just really starved to have these characters come back, Yeah. It kind of reminds me, like when you were talking about even the way they handled the sequels there at the end of the 80s and everything with Friday the 13th. It's like the producers, it's like they just wanted Jason to fail so bad. So they're like, well, let's do this Carrie versus Jason thing where we cut out all the gore.
Well, they were just looking for they were just looking for something that was like a gimmick to get people in the theaters and stuff like that. Mitch asked just now, can crowdfunding work as an investment model for original projects? Yes, that's what it's built for. Crowdfunding was originally out there to do original projects, and a lot of original projects get made. Like we did the Bath Bomb Project, we did the Judy Project, we did Pathosis. We've done a lot of different projects like that. A lot of different feature films have been funded through Indiegogo, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. I mean, there was a guy, on Kickstarter, Chris Stuckman raised what, 1.3, $2.1 million, something like that. There was a fan film that raised $2.1 million, Star Trek. That's the one that got sued. So it's definitely possible. I think that Womp Stomp could raise a decent budget. I think my first attempt would be doing an original short to try and get as much money on the screen in a short amount of time as possible. Not to say I'd make like a 2-minute short, but like if I did 50 grand, say we raised 50 grand, I'd make a 20-minute short. Mm-hmm. And, that would allow me to pay for 5 days of filming. Not even. I mean, I might have to raise $75,000 just to do 5 days of filming. You know what I mean? Wow. Depending on that. But if I'm in Massachusetts, I may have to pay significantly less amount of money because I'm not in the LA money machine where every time you go to a location, they just want to eat your entire budget. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do as much in that realm. You can actually spend more of it on diversify your bonds to different parts of your movie versus having to, shove it all over to one thing, or, go through SAG and give them half your money and like all this stuff. Like, really got to focus on doing it in the super independent way and getting as much bang for your buck as possible on screen. But do it. You can do it.
I know that's, George Romero ended up shooting a lot of his later films up in Canada because of the break on, having unions. It's just a lot more affordable to produce films up there. So I think that's a smart way to approach it too, is find a place that's going to treat you fairly and appreciate the fact that you're you want to make a film in that
Yeah, I think
state,
it's, I mean, obviously I understand why studios have to deal with unions because they have the money to deal with it. The independent films really get screwed by them. I think there has to be some type of in between. Like when you're working with independent production, that's not something that's an AMTP, AMPTP production. That's something that's just like somebody raised some money, with their personal funds. It's nice when other people go, okay, we're going to step outside the union. We're going to do this off the books, and we're going to do it because we all just want to make it and we want to work together. I think that is something that, it's very special when you find those people. I'm glad that I have a lot of that with Womp Stomp Films, but I do think that eventually everyone outgrows that stuff and you got to start from scratch. And, I'm looking forward to building a team out here and then, mixing, matching people from Womp Stomp in LA, bringing them out here to help. And then, creating like a super team in Massachusetts to then take advantage of the savings that we could have out here instead of having to do the things that we have to do in LA all the time, in order to make films, which, Never Hike Alone 2, we raised $100,000 for that and spent on it. But, I look at other territories where I could have filmed it if I had done it in other territories and been like, wow, I could have done it for a lot less. I could have done more. You know what I mean? But because I'm here, because I'm based here, because this is where all my sets and all my crew are, these are the rates I'm paying. So I have to pay at a higher rate. It's like living in LA. Yeah, you might get paid more, but the cost of living is also much higher. So it kind of is a wash. And it's one of the reasons why I left. If I wanted to be independent and if I wanted to do this myself, LA is not necessarily the place unless you have investors that are just going to give you millions and millions of dollars. And when you do, you're still going to take that money and you're going to escape LA and you're going to go to some small market town where you get like a decent crew to come out and help and just like put some department heads in the right places from LA or, from either LA, Atlanta, or New York. Or Vancouver, kind of like the four corners of filmmaking, I would say here, Chicago being another place where a lot of great filmmakers, and there's a good hub there too. Other than that, you're just flying people around and you're finding local clues. So I'm hoping to do that pretty soon here.
All right. Yeah, I think, you send people off to Georgia or South Carolina to film. I know a lot of films are made out there, but like you're talking about not having to use a union and having great people still on board. I think that just kind of speaks to, there's a level of trust. Like people have to trust you, and you've earned
and you still
trust.
try to run it like a union show. It's just you're not there to go through like a payroll and pay taxes and like do all these crazy things. It's like everyone just works like, W-9, they get paid directly, they pay their own taxes, they deal with it themselves. Like, or sometimes, I don't know if anyone's going to get mad at me for this, but it's just like a cash deal. You know what I mean? I'm going to give you cash to come out and work and don't report it. Don't do anything. Just take the money.
This is under the table.
This is under the table, and let's just get together and do that. You know what I mean? And
I like that because I'm punk rock.
I like it too. Because
I get the man out of there.
I don't need the government involved with my movie. I'm sorry. Like I'm not.
These damn government types.
Yeah. Anyway, before I get sued by the IRS,
they want your money. How many times do I need to be taxed? When you get your money, you're taxed. When you go spend your money, you're taxed. Like if you buy somebody a gift card, it's taxed like 5 times.
Yeah. How about when you pay payroll as a company, you're paying taxes on what your employees making, and then your employees being taxed on what they make.
Yeah, and then tax when they go to the store.
And then tax when they go to the store to spend that money. So you're getting taxed 3 times.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, I got to pay like for SAG, you got to pay P&H, which not P&H. P&H, pension and health. So now I'm paying 21% of the pension and health on an indie budget. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like my bills go 150% from what I intended on paying a lot of people because it has to go through that system versus like I could just hand you cash now and you'd actually be paid more because you'd actually get it back. But I'm gonna pay twice as much as it is to pay you, and you're gonna make like 3/4 of what you would have made if I would have just given you cash.
Yeah.
And it's stupid. It's stupid.
To me, it sounds like the government is just like kind of like gangsters. Like, it would be a shame if something happened to your career and your livelihood.
It would be a shame if we claimed all your assets.
Yeah, like you're gonna have to like, how much are you gonna pay me this week to pay for protection here? Let's see here. Lupe, still in the chat. Lupe was wanting to know which Friday the 13th character Vin would like to see back, and now she wants to know what your favorite Thanksgiving dessert is. What you got?
Dessert?
Yeah.
Oh my
You
God,
don't even like
probably.
dessert. That's what that says.
No, I love it. Probably, I like chocolate.
Okay.
I'm not like a big pumpkin spice guy, or I'm not a big pie person either. Like some type of chocolate afterwards, just like either fresh baked cookies, brownies,
Okay.
um, something that's just like you're done eating and then you just want to sit down with some nice some chocolatey goodness and a coffee,
There you go.
and watch some football.
Perfect. Yeah, so you're a Pats fan, right?
Yeah, unfortunately
But
this year.
I've seen a picture of you with a Yankees hat on. How does that work?
hmm
Is that do you get a
So when I
lot of
was
grief?
young, yeah, a ton. When I was young, I liked both teams. Like I didn't like part of my family likes the Yankees, part of my family likes the Red Sox. My uncle was a dead ringer for Don Mattingly, and so I always thought that it was him playing on screen, but he also looked like Wade Boggs, so I thought he played
Okay.
for both teams, and I always wondered
Yeah.
how we got to both games. I was very young, mind you,
Still
um,
believed in Santa and
and
all
so
that.
I just all that stuff. That definitely that time. And my aunt and uncle took me to a Yankee game, Yankee Red Sox. This is when Bernie Williams was playing well and sort of just coming up. I don't even know
Hmm.
if Derek Jeter was there yet. But I went, and since I was with them, I wore a Yankee hat, and I was at Fenway, and I got yelled at the entire game by adults, and it made me
Yeah.
not like the Red Sox. And so I grew up a Yankee fan. I also I actually grew up a big Dan Marino fan, because he wore 13, and I just loved him because he wore
Hmm.
13.
Yeah.
And then when I was young and I played football, I played Pee Wee football, but I went to Drew Bledsoe football camp. And I
Oh,
also
cool.
met a longtime Patriot, like way back when, linebacker. His name was Andre Tippett. I met him at a martial arts tournament because he was a big martial arts guy. And so like I always had like the connection to the Patriots, but they were never good enough to like root for in a sense of like, ooh, they might win this year. So I was always like, while the Patriots were being shitty, I was
Yeah.
always rooting for another team to be like, okay, well, I'm going to root for that team because I think that they should win it this year since they actually have a chance, which is kind of like
Hmm.
what I'm doing this year with the Lions. I'm like, you know what? If anybody wins, I want to see the Lions pull it off.
Yeah.
While the Pats are trying to figure it out. And then like I became like what I loved the most was, Drew Bledsoe, and that was cool. I went to Drew Bledsoe football camp. I caught a pass from Drew Bledsoe. That really kind of connected me to the team. And then when they came out in 2001 and the Super Bowl as a team against the Rams, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Like they just like totally bucked the trend of like individual players and blah, blah, blah. It was just like the New England Patriots have elected to come out as a team. And I was like, they're going to win this game. They are going
Yeah.
to win this game because the world is rooting against them. And now it's just sort of like being back in Massachusetts. It reminds me of like one of the annoying things about why I don't tend to love a lot of Boston sports is that the media ruins everything.
Mm.
The minute something goes wrong, they want to burn down the house.
Yeah.
Everybody hates everybody. Everybody hates Mac. Everybody hates Bill. Everybody hates Robert Kraft. And I thought that Bill Burr had the best response to it the other day on the Rich
Oh,
Eisen
on Rich
show.
Eisen. Yeah, I watched
Oh
that.
my
Yeah, I
God, it
love
was
the Rich.
so
Yeah, I
good.
watched that whole.
What are you gonna do? I
Yeah.
love Bill.
Oh yeah, and then
Bill
who
is
are
my
you gonna
spirit
have
animal.
coach the team? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the fact that like, if
Spoiled
there's anybody who
brats.
could turn it around to like could fix it is the person who broke it. And yeah, Bill broke a lot of different things. He made some bad decisions, but you know
Mhm.
what? He's still our coach. I
Yeah.
still want them to do well. I mean, I look at it from the standpoint of like, listen, like we already are way up on championships from everybody else. We don't have to worry about anyone else trying to steal our crown for a long time. We got to figure it out now. So since everybody's injured, since we're not playing that well, this is the perfect time to take all of these younger players, all of these, rookies and second year people who aren't getting a lot of playing time and just shove them in the games.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Nothing.
I, yeah.
You're already eliminated from the playoffs, basically. You're not trying to make the playoffs right now. Go out there
Hmm.
and give them experience. So next year, when most of your starters come back, they're coming back against younger players who are more seasoned and can help them be
Yeah.
better. And as a team, they'll grow together and they'll be like, that last year, that 2-8 season that we had, we finished 5 and whatever. Let's not do that again this year. Like
Yeah.
we don't want to do that again, knowing that that's going to be in their future if they don't get it together and then go put together a few different pieces in the off season. I still think they can be good. I had faith in them this year, and then I realized that the bucket of lies that we were sold is that like how bad our offensive line was, and there's no way
Yeah.
anybody is good with a line like that. So fix
True.
it.
Yeah.
Can't fix it right now. You got to fix it for next year. Listen, another team is going to win. And honestly, I could use a break. I could use a break, not wondering if throughout the entire year if the Patriots are going to make it. Because I can tell you, it's a lot worse when you go all the way to the AFC Championship and you lose to the Broncos or you lose to the Colts. I've been there for those years, and those were painful. And you know what? After those seasons, people were talking about, we need to get rid of Brady. We need to get rid of Belichick, blah, blah, blah. And then they go and win 3 more championships 5 years later.
Yeah,
so
I think people don't
it's the same thing over again. It's the same thing all over again.
People don't understand how difficult football is as just a game itself, and then how difficult it gets at the professional level, because just to be able, like, there are franchises that still have never won a Super Bowl ever or even been to one. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you're lucky to have that history. When we were growing up, I know they played the 85 Bears in the Super Bowl and got stomped, but after that they were complete garbage until they went back. Like they were,
and then they got stomped by the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
I watched that game. I didn't think they were going to win at all.
Yeah, the Packers were damn good at that time. And, you know, they were the team that when I grew up playing Madden 93 on my Sega Genesis, I would be the 72 Dolphins and just destroy the Patriots all the time because they were so bad back then. You know,
I would always be Tecmo Bowl Super Bowl, and I'd be the I think it was the Giants, and I'd be Otis Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
Always running the sweep. And then you could be Thurman Thomas for the Bills, and he was nasty. And I never even thought I never realized how good Bo Jackson was in that game, but apparently he was a beast too. So
yeah,
it was
especially
always something.
In the first one. Yeah, especially in
the that's what it was, the first one.
He just like him and Marcus Allen on the Raiders, like you can't stop him. But yeah, I grew up, I'm a Yankees fan. My family are all Orioles fans, and so I kind of wanted to go against them. And in the mid 80s, I just got really into the whole dynasty era of, you know, guys like Gehrig and DiMaggio. And I was like, man, the Yankees are kind of responsible for making baseball, like, you know, at least a huge part of why baseball is such a big thing in this country. And
I mean, they were the main event for a long time. And like, you know, looking back at the history, being Italian, there's so many Italian baseball players that were on those teams that it was another reason why I was always like, hey, a bunch of paisans. I love it. You know what I mean? So that always meant a lot to me. And again, it was all just family, you know what I mean? Like, and then it was fun. And then, you know, at a young age, you're rooting for a team and all of a sudden they start winning championship after championship after championship. You can't help but, you know, want to root for it. Because, you know, you're rooting for a winner. And then, you know, they've struggled and, you know, it's the same thing. I feel like they've been, ever since Cashman got made the GM, it's always been the same thing. They put together these really stacked, expensive teams that always fall apart in the playoffs. No one's got that razor's edge like Jeter had, where he could lock in. And like the way that, you know, that team, Paul O'Neill, Bernie Williams, you know, who else was on that team? Even Scott Brocious and
Jim Leyritz had that huge World Series, you know, where he was just the thickest
Dave
thighs
Justice.
in all of baseball. David Justice,
Yeah,
well, and like Mariano Rivera and Andy Pettit and and then you got guys like David Wells and David Cohn, and you know, you got guys that are throwing perfect games and no hitters like it ain't no big deal.
Drunk. Like David Wells.
David Wells is like, I'll eat 10 burgers, you know.
He's the John Daly of baseball.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So, speaking of which, it was kind of nice I didn't have to worry about the Yankees about halfway through the season. I knew it wasn't going to happen this year. And Lupe, I'm a basic bitch. I really like pumpkin pie, but my wife makes a really good dark chocolate pumpkin cake.
Ooh,
it is super damn good.
Maybe I gotta try that. I'll try that. I'll fly out.
Yeah, we should definitely. The next time you're in town, we'll do a whole thing because Kate
whip that up.
She loves that. Yeah. And let's see here. What else we got? I see you reacting to a couple of them, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. What's that? Wrote a plain text amendment.
A lot of good shout outs to Pathosis. Definitely, we had a lot of success with that. I'm having that on the channel. I think that's on the Never Hike in the Snow Blu-ray too. So if you ever wanted to have that at home, we'll have it in that. I think eventually, if we get one more big not never hike. If we get one more Womp Stomp Films original piece
Mm-hmm.
out that I think would suffice to make a Blu-ray, I think we would do like an original Blu-ray and release that, and then we'd actually be able to keep some of the proceeds from it, which would be nice.
Yeah,
Because yeah, got to start making money with this sometime. It's not like the
sure.
core aspect of it when I started doing it, but now we want to find a way to make it, bring back some money and, which will just fund more things.
Yeah, and you've earned, I think the one thing that a lot of people understand, a lot of fans understand, is that you've earned the right to want to do something that's creatively satisfying for you that's outside of, IPs that already exist. So I
And
think,
people want to see it. People have been asking for it
yeah,
for a long time, and they've seen glimpses of it. But now it'd be nice to really kind of put the type of budget that we've had for Never Hike Alone into one of these original projects and really see what we could do with it.
yeah. And I think that's like the next wave, right? So you would kind of kick this whole thing off with Never Hike Alone, and then Bruce and Dave have been really vocal about once It's Me Billy Chapter Two's done, they're done with fan films and they're going to focus on original stuff. And I know,
Yeah, and they have some stuff that they're working on that's really good. We've talked about it, and I think we're all doing the same thing. We're all just like, again, raising tide raises all ships.
mhm,
And we're all out here supporting each other, and we know that like we got each other's backs, and I think that's what's nice. I've dealt with, when you make fan films, people like to snicker behind your backs. They like to make fun of you. And there are people out there that are doing it for the wrong reasons. There are people out
mhm,
there who make films because they want to be famous, or
yeah,
they have some ulterior motive for what they're doing. It's like, the people out here that we work with, they're genuine. They're genuine people who love film and have good ideas, and we're here to help them out. And, they take care of their people. And that's what's important to me, is that like, it's teams that take care of their people. They treat other people with respect. They treat other teams with respect, and like I said, everyone's working together to so everyone finds success. And it's the people who, work behind the scenes to diminish other, filmmakers in the sense of, talking behind their backs, or finding out that they're screwing over this guy, or screwing over, the
mhm,
next guy, or screwing over their own crew, and like doing all these things. It's one of those things that we keep an eye out for, and we try not to
yeah,
work with those people. We try to avoid those people.
mhm,
And that's just a lesson in life, because you're going to see that in any industry. It's just sort
yeah,
of, some people are out there for the wrong reasons, some people are out there for the right reasons, and you just need to find your team and the people who support you. And I'm glad that like we have that, like there's a good strong bond here from people all over the country. I mean, Cortland's in Michigan, James and Carl are in Portland, Cecil's in Phoenix, Dave's up in Toronto. My friend Colin is up in Toronto doing the Bath Bomb Project. Rob's out in LA doing that. Now I'm back in Massachusetts. And what that does is it creates a network of people who at some point when they need to go somewhere to make something have 5, 6 different states and another whole other country to say, hey, if we did something, could you host us? Could you help
mhm,
us?
yeah,
Like James and Carl helped out big time. I Never Hike Alone too. Like all those lake scenes, those are up in Carson, Washington. That's in James and Carl's neck of the woods. That's their territory, and they
yeah,
hosted us and they helped us get there. And together, we worked together to make our film good, just the way that we worked together to make Jason Rising is the best thing it could be. And so, when you have camaraderie like that, you know you're not just supporting one filmmaker. When you support that one filmmaker, you're supporting all the other filmmakers that help that filmmaker, because eventually that's going to roll over to them as well.
mhm. Yeah, and it's I we all want to assume that like the groups and communities we're in are filled with people that, are good people and have nothing but the best intentions, but there's bad people in every group of people.
Yeah.
Going back to like my experience in punk rock, I always just assumed like, oh yeah, we're going to take care of each other. Like we play on a bill together, we're going to split the money from the door. I'll hook you up with a show, you hook me up with a show. And a lot of people are that way, but yeah, like you're saying, you run into people where it's like, well, why did these guys take all the money from the door? Like, or
Mhm.
why did I always give this guy a show when he comes to town and then he just ghosts me when I try to reach out for a show in his town? It's like, dude, if you don't
Mhm.
want to help, just say you don't want to help. I don't mind. Like, that's the thing, I guess, with me, Vin, is like, I tell people, I don't take it personally if it doesn't work out. But if you act like unprofessional or shitty, I do take
Hmm.
that personally. Like, I don't want to be lied to. Just tell me
Yeah.
no, or like I, whatever. If it doesn't work out, then that's cool. But like, if you're gonna
Yeah.
be like weird about it, then I'm gonna think it's something personal.
With me, it's like I just want people to put in the same effort into their project that I would put into my own project. And I have been, um, I've been on different productions where, people have asked me to come on, they've asked for my expertise or they've asked for me to help out. And then what I really discovered is that they just wanted to get the Womp Stomp name on their project so they could
Mm,
get more views and get more money and not
mm-hmm.
do any of the things that makes Womp Stomp films. And, Womp Stomp, the buck stops with me. I'm the one who has to answer for every decision that we make. And if you're not going to follow through with, some of the core principles of how we're going to achieve projects, then I don't want to be associated with you. And there was like a big one that happened many years ago where, they basically wanted me to like sign off on a script that I wasn't approving on because, well, I only sign off on scripts that are completed.
Mm.
You need to have an ending. And so when I said, if you don't have an ending and you don't have an idea of where you want to go, I can't put my public support on this yet. And I can't go ask certain actors to be in your film
Yeah.
because I don't have something that I can go to them with confidence and say, like, I've, put this thing through the ringer. We kicked the tires. We checked all the valves and this is a story and this is going to be worth your time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people want to skip those steps. They just want to get to the money part. And they think the money's going to solve everything. But the money can't buy you a story. The money can't buy you talent to make a good movie. It can get you talent to like surround yourself. But if you don't know what you're doing and you don't possess the skills to create films that are going to cohesively work together and are going to become basically like 2-hour backyard movie projects that you made as a kid, like with just better production value,
Yeah.
like long term, and what you see as your goal is not going to be attainable. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, you're only hurting yourself because if you want the same success that I've had, well, these are the trials and tribulations I had to go through to get to my success. And and again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast about my sports career. Hard work pays off. If you don't put in the hard work, it's not going to pay off.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've had to, split, with certain filmmakers at certain points in my career because it just wasn't resonating with them. And I just didn't want to be sort of, taken advantage of anymore. I felt like I was sort of being taken advantage of by people. And then, they make me out to be the bad guy when I'm like, well, I'm sorry that I no longer support you. But like when I no longer support and when, I don't do that, well, I take everything with me. So that becomes the people that I've recommended for your project. That comes the people that I've created, connections with you to other places because the only reason why they were connected with you is because I was vouching for you. And if I pull my support, that's a red flag to them. You know what I mean? And then they have a decision to make and they can work with you or not work with you. But from my standpoint, I don't want to work with you. And that's like, again, a red flag. And so it's not my fault when people pull out support, when, you're doing things that I think are not going to lead to the best outcome.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the things that comes with your success is there are people that are like, oh, how can I piggyback off that really easily, or coming at you with some half-baked idea or whatever, which is why like when I see your name or Womp Stomp's name on something, I'm like, all right, well, I know it's going to be legit because Vin busts his ass.
The effort, the effort will be there. You know what I mean? Like I can't say that like we can't promise that every time it's going to work out. We've done a couple of projects where it hasn't quite worked out how we wanted it to, but everything finds its audience. And sometimes like I have to recognize that like it might not make too much sense to me, but this isn't made for me. It's made for somebody else, and this will connect with other people. But again, like good or bad, like as long as the production is run properly and we do the things that we can to succeed and we all take care of each other, that's what's most important. Good films are going to come, bad films are going to come. But I think people trust in sort of like we have a good batting average. I think it's the best way to say it. Like, we might not get a hit every time we get up, but when it counts, like there's either going to at least be something rewarding about the film that was made it worth watching, even if you didn't enjoy the whole thing or if you nitpick it in a certain way, like that's totally fine. But the films are going to be worth your time to nitpick and talk about and discuss versus just being like a complete waste of your time for, however many minutes or hours you have to sit down and watch one.
Yeah, and hey, if you're batting 1 out of 3, then you're in the Hall of Fame. So there you
Yeah.
go. And
But
I
I think
think
you got to bat a little bit higher in film.
oh,
Unless you're
absolutely.
John Carpenter, then you can.
Oh,
No,
jeez.
I'm just kidding.
Hey, but some of his best movies just
I'm just
did
making
not
fun.
pop off. But yeah, he's got some weak ones in there. Everyone does. I
I
think that's the
love
fun thing about
I
art,
loved
though.
Escape from New York. Thank
Yeah.
you. What happened with Escape from LA?
Yeah, I don't even think I've seen Escape from LA, but
It's something.
yeah, I've
It
seen
is
some
what
of
it is.
the surfing. Well, that's all I need to see from that.
Yeah, I think it was Vampires with Me. It was like I was like, this is
Mm,
John Carpenter. What the hell is this? James
yeah,
Woods. That whole movie's like in red. It was weird.
it is an odd flick. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, and I think with even the projects that don't work out the way that you want to, you learn something from those. You take
Yeah.
that, you take what I mean, just coming from music background and a little bit, I've been doing YouTube. I try to approach each video. I'm like, okay, well, how can I make an improvement? Is there a piece of equipment I need to invest in, or I need to be the first critic of my own performance so I can
Mhm.
put out a better video next time, or
Yeah, and a lot of
recording
people
music.
don't notice it as hard as we do. Like they may not like react to it as big as maybe we wanted them to, or maybe we didn't reach it so it doesn't. But for the most part, we're a lot harder on ourselves as creators than the people who watch the films are, even though sometimes it can be pretty hard when they're really, really bad. Don't watch Escape from LA. That's so funny. And what's up, Robert Wolfman?
Hey,
Dude,
Robert, what's
Rob's
happening,
great.
man?
He's one of our MVPs from Dylan's for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely. That's so funny. Don't watch Escape from. I love it.
and I see
New
here
York
what
is to LA is like
Mitch,
kills two ends. Yeah.
Mitch. Hey, whoa, Alley girl, come on, that's pretty harsh.
That's funny.
Yeah, you really got me there, Allie. Mitch the Ripper wrote up there, I wrote a plain tax amendment that would limit the tax amount to 10% maximum. Do it, Mitch. Run for office. Get in there.
I know, right? We got a lot of Mitch is definitely a politician.
And Tyler wants to do some VFX for you. Would love to do VFX work for Womp Stomp. All right.
We'll get there when the new stuff starts coming out. We'll start building our teams much earlier and get everything ahead of time. I think a lot of the stuff that happened with Never Hike is that we just had our team waiting in the wings, and then it was time to go. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then we just had to rip it out in like the few short weeks that we had to do all that work because we had been delayed so much. But in the end of the day, I think that proud of what we made. It was a long-term effort. It took a lot of perseverance to get through it. But at the end of the day, like I sit back, I watched it the other night in Providence for PVD Horror. Shout out for the sweet sweatshirt that they gave me, to sit back and sit there in the film. And I've seen it a million times, but my viewing of the film is sitting back, closing my eyes, and listening to the audience react, laugh at funny lines, react to big gags, jump at scare scenes. And then the Q&As afterwards are always very interesting. What people have to say, the glowing reviews. A lot of it's funny. A lot of people came up to me in the screening the other day, and they were like, this is my first ever like independent movie in a theater. I've never seen a film that's not been a studio film at a theater, but I wanted to come check this out.
Yeah.
And they walked out of there going like, that was cool as hell. Like he's like, I didn't expect it to be that good. And that's always like, I always love that when people they come in, not that they underestimate you, but they just, what do they expect? You know what I mean? And a lot of what they've seen over the years, because we're horror fans, we're used to things not always being up to snuff, for them to walk out of it and be like, I exclusively watch studio stuff, and I watched your thing as the first independent thing that I've ever watched. And they probably watch other independent things not knowing it. And they said, I was blown away. And so it's good. It's like, good. Then I'm on the level that I want to be on. And now I have to do this with original work.
Yeah. I think people like with that kind of stuff, maybe they figure they're going to grade it on a different scale. And then they actually experience the movie and they're like, oh, fuck, I didn't have to do that. Like this thing is right there. And like, that's the feel that I get from it too, that it's this, so Alley Girl says here, I don't even call Never Hike Alone and It's Me Billy fan films when I'm talking to people about them. And yeah, I feel the same kind of way. It's almost like it feels like a derogatory term. But it's, I think it was some giant phrase that I put together that's like professionally made, fan funded independent films. It's like, I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
like,
like,
how do you like it? Because it is, I think that's the important thing is the fan funded. So instead of saying fan film, I like saying fan funded because that
I mean,
means,
I,
hey,
I don't think that it's necessarily the worst thing in the world to call something a fan film. I just think that there are there are feature films that aren't good. You know what I
mhm,
mean? There are feature
yeah,
studio films that aren't good. I think that like it just says that like it's not an official entry, but it doesn't mean that it's bad.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I think that that's the problem. It's not our fault that like fan film became synonymous with poor quality. Um, the problem with it was the poor quality was due to the technology, not so much the
yeah,
filmmakers. Because if you
hmm
go back and you look at some of the early Friday the 13th fan films, the only thing holding those filmmakers back is the quality of filmmaking equipment that they had.
hmm
And that's not their fault. Like that's just where technology was, and that's where the home video market was in the early 2000s and late 1990s, early 2000s,
hmm
even early 20 teens wasn't where it was when we had the opportunity to make Never Hike Alone, the original. That's when it was really starting to turn the corner, and people were really just starting to figure out how to shoot with DSLRs and things like that and do productions on them, and they were teaching those things in colleges at that point. um, so we just took advantage of being at the right place at the right time with a good story to tell. I
yeah,
mean, if you go back and you look at any of those Friday the 13th fan films, and they started at the same time we did, they had their stories, they had their resources, and they did those things, they would be being talked about a lot more than they are now. But they did, despite those poor quality productions that they put together, like in the early courses of the years, they still managed. One of them was up, past 1 million views. It had been online for 10 years, but it still got 1 million.
yeah.
That's a lot, no matter what. Then
Oh
that's a
yeah.
lot of people showing up and watching your film. So even if they're watching it over and over again, well, then they're all watching it over and over again for a reason because they connect with it in some way.
hmm
So, I think that fan film, people just assume that people just don't shoot films like that anymore. I mean, they do with their phones, but your phone is better than what we had to shoot with back in 2006.
Yeah.
So, um,
When I think
you know,
about people using camcorders from the 80s,
exactly,
80s and
exactly.
90s, where it's like a Star Trek fan film, or yeah, and I think that it's just one of those things that fan films, that term has that connotation
Mhm.
exactly for what you're saying because of just the lack of production value. So I think
Exactly.
that you guys, what Womp Stomp does, and what Dave and Bruce are doing, it's kind of just redefining that term, and it may take some time for the people that aren't the hardcore fans like us and like Allie here, that really can kind of tell that nuanced
hmm
difference. But
hmm
I think in time, people are, yeah, they're gonna, once they watch it, like the people that I ran into at Thanksgiving the other night, at Thanksgiving the movie, I told them about Dylan's New Nightmare and Never Hike Alone, and I'm like, "Have you seen it?" And the guy was like, "Have I seen it?" And I'm like, "So Tommy Jarvis comes back," and I kind of like give him the light explanation. He's like, "I think I did see that," and I'm like, "Well, go watch it again if you're not sure." We just need more people to, like she's saying, you got to tell the person in line at TJ Maxx. You gotta be like, you gotta watch this movie. Like, I went and got my haircut today, and I tell them about, people that or I'm becoming buddies with that are making films because I'm so pumped on what is being done here in the community. And I just think more people gotta. That's how you have to spread that word, is word of mouth, sharing it on, on social media. What did Cecil said something, be a Davy Death Ray when it comes to fan films. Like, I am unabashedly, I just want to share that stuff because if somebody does something I really appreciate, I want other people to at least give it a shot. It's awesome. We got people like Allie here and Mitch that are definitely like-minded as well. Um, Tyler says Christine is one of my favorites. Yeah, I've only seen Christine once, Tyler. I bought it. It's crazy. I bought the Steelbook like 2 years ago, and one of those movies that just sat. We were like, Kate and I are just waiting for the right time to put it on. We put it on about a month ago, and I was like pretty blown away at. I really love the practical effects. When Christine puts herself back together with the reverse. hydraulics that they did for that, where they shot it in reverse and then reversed the film. And some of those lens flares that Carpenter gets there, and the score is really good.
Hmm.
And I love Keith Gordon. That I love that guy. I love him in Jaws 2, and I love him in Scream. I don't know if I've seen him in anything else, but I love him in both those movies. Yeah, Christine's got a fun vibe.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Let's see here. So if you want to know how good Womp Stomp film is, I watch the Never Hike Alone stuff nearly as often as I watch the original Halloween. Yeah, I say nearly because there you go. Continuing analysis of Halloween. Yeah, I think especially, coming up to Never Hike Alone 2 coming out this year, I was getting everything in the rotation and, wanted to time everything right so I could kind of catch up with the rewatch. Actually, I watched the Ghost cut for the first time because I had already seen Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow separate, but I hadn't seen the cut together. I really like that Disappear video too. That looked like a lot of just the slow motion. Everything looks so beautiful. It's kind of cool to see Jason doing his thing and have it look that pretty.
Oh yeah, and I feel like Disappear is probably the most underrated of all the productions because it has one of the coolest looks, especially that set that we got on with the lights coming through. It's like some of the best shots we ever got, and that was the cheapest production that we ever did. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's with him up in the attic thinking about things.
Yeah.
And speaking of music, that track that you have at the end of Never Hike Alone 2, I'm blanking on the name right now, but I'll tell
It's
you
called
what.
Old Fence.
Old Fence. So that's like a style of music or a genre of music that I wouldn't necessarily put on out of my own taste to just listen to, but I love when I hear a piece of music like that that's just so perfect for the film that it's in. That's a tough thing to do. I think a lot of people will stack a soundtrack with just songs they like, but to have a song that just that enhances the piece as well, really, really good shit.
So
and just another layer of impressiveness in the production.
well, the funny thing is that the guy who wrote Another Soul for Never Hike Alone 1, Cut Here for Never Hike in the Snow was cut here. Never Hike Alone 1 was Another Soul. Disappear and Old Fence are all the same guy. It's all the same musician.
Awesome.
He just does wildly different. In fact, Old Fence is the track on that same album right before Another Soul. Trevor is a very gifted musician who one of his greatest assets is his variety and the fact that he can write for almost any genre. Like he can rap, he can play like death metal, he can play like the hardest core punk you've ever heard. Like that's his like core music. He was in a band called X-Files X. Way back in the day that was like big in our area, and just like he's in something called Brother now, and he's got a few other bands that he plays with. He's got another thing where he play like it's like Papa Cherry's Pipe or something like that, and it's like it sounds like old English music like hobbits would listen to. It's friggin' hilarious.
So he's like a songwriter by assignment, kind of like it's,
he just whatever he feels like writing, he just writes it. He writes like John Carpenter style tracks of just all electronic, digitized keyboard stuff. Like it goes in so many different directions, and he's just super talented. And I think that like it just became a theme that we were always going to have one of his songs on the movies. And Old Fence to me stood out because it's just like Jason's calling to come home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just matched exactly the mood of what needed to be said there. It was also sort of celebratory that like we finally finished, we got to the finish line, and that meant a lot to me too.
Yeah. And it has this, I kind of got a little bit of like Zeppelin-y kind of vibes, but completely stripped down. Like you're saying, it really fits it's almost like the percussion. It'd be like stomping on the floor of a cabin at Crystal Lake, like there are just some things that instrumentally that organically fit the piece. It's, again, just, a special moment when a song on a soundtrack helps enhance what's going on, because I think that takes a whole different level of thought, or luck, or a mixture of both. But yeah, having those are the musicians that I'll have to take the deep dive into everything Trevor does, because those are the musicians that I think we end up loving and celebrating, the people that can do anything. Like you look at somebody like Prince, and he did any kind of music he wanted to. He did ballads, he did funk, he did rock and roll, he did whatever. And like bands like Queen, they just did whatever the hell they want. They'll write a damn ragtime song and you'll love it. They'll do an arena rock song. They'll do a song that sounds like it's from a musical theater, like whatever they want. And that's when you realize, oh shit, these people are just badasses. They know the assignment and they know how to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Like, and yeah, so yeah, Trevor's definitely got that, you know, in our local area, he's got that vibe to him. And I'm super happy to promote a local artist, somebody who's from New Bedford, from South Coast, Massachusetts. You know, my friends help me with some of the other songs that are on there. You know, my old band is on the new film. The Hikerman 5000 theme song is from a band that I was in for a long time. It was after I had left to LA and they kept writing that we used one of those songs just because that was the one that fit. Those same guys came and helped me write the Trail Junkies song by the Damn
nice.
Enchiladas. Yeah, Run Like Hell, which is named after a friend's old band. Like, I was in a band called End It All. We had a practice space with another band called Run Like Hell. And we were just like all friends. And like they played more like heavier pop punk, like kind of thrashy punk, pop punk kind of type thing with like screaming and vocals, like an It Dies Today type thing. And then we were like straight up death metal. But we got together and like we just collaborated and we came up with the Damn Enchiladas, and came up with the Run Like Hell song that became the Trail Junkies theme song. So like, nice. And we just had like funny riffs and we were just kids who got together and like just played music and had a great time.
So what's your instrument?
I was vocals. I just did screaming.
Do you play guitar or piano?
I do play guitar. Like I play guitar, and I dabble with other things, but I'm not very good at anything else. Like I would love to learn how to play drums. I just never sat down to do it, but I play guitar. I've been playing guitar since high school. Yeah. Cool. And I love it. And so we'll sit down and write riffs together and then we'll come up with other stuff. It was a very collaborative process. I just found that, you know, the two guys who played guitar in my band were much better than I was. And they were extremely talented. A guy, Jake Gonzalez and Ryan Willis, they were fucking awesome. And they're brutal too. We played some brutal stuff and they came up with some rad breakdowns. Our band is actually on one of the editions of Metal Blade's Metal Massacres. Metal Massacre 13 were the last track on the Metal Massacre 13 compilation with Black Dahlia Murder, and a few other big bands from that year. So we snuck on as like one of the 3 unsigned bands to be on the same metal anthology that started with Metallica, which I thought was pretty cool. So we never made it, but we did, again, like we did something. So it was kind of cool.
I feel the same way about like my time playing in bands is, you know, it's the exercise for me and the creative process that, you know, I just think it helps with mental health. And, you know, humans are creative beings. Some people create people, some people create movies, some people create music or all 3. But, you know, I think there's something about that creative process that's just satisfying within itself, whether or not, you know, whatever success means to you. I feel kind of the same way about YouTube. It's like, I'm not too concerned about like chasing this or that. To me, it's like this whole process is really therapeutic and fun. And yeah, I feel the same way about music. Like never made it, but I got to my goal. Like when I got into punk rock and I heard Face to Face, that was like the band that pushed me over the edge because I was really into Green Day, heard NoFX, all that stuff. And when I heard Face to Face's Don't Turn Away album for the first time, I was like, that's it. I'm going to start writing music and I'm going to start a band. And I was 13 years old in Juneau, Alaska, and did it. Damn. I was like, I'm just going to start my damn band. And yeah, one of those things where like never made it, but wouldn't take it back for anything because it was such a huge part of just developing who I would become. Punk rock helped shape the way I feel about a lot of things, like taxes. So, hey, speaking of which, Metallica or Megadeth?
Oh my God!
Wisely.
Honestly, well,
there's only one right answer, Vin.
I'm not a huge fan of either, really. Like the stuff I like is a lot heavier than that. Although I would say my favorite song out of any of them is Battery by Metallica. That's probably my favorite Metallica song. The only one that I really, really like. Everything else I'm kind of like, meh. Yeah. Like I'd rather listen to At the Gates. Like I'd rather listen to, yeah.
Yeah, you like the heavier. Yeah. I mean, and I think metal, it's really cool to see how far it's come, that it really like, yeah, I love like Rust in Peace by Megadeth. I mean, I love a whole bunch of their stuff, but to me, it's like Rust in Peace is like good luck trying to top that album, you
There's
know?
some guy on, I see him on Instagram a lot. He's probably on TikTok too, but he's like this amazing guitarist. And he's always like, what if like, we'll do a
Is,
Megadeth song that I'll only play the Megadeth song as long as, his lyrics aren't annoying. And then like the minute he starts the lyrics, like the song ends. It's like, it never
oh,
fails. But
that's pretty funny.
but he's super funny and he always does that stuff. And honestly, I enjoy it more through the way that both those bands are parodied rather
Hmm.
than the way that they actually are. But I don't know. I just like, I always grew up being like, it's not heavy enough. It's not heavy enough. It's not like, this is kind of heavy. This is kind of heavy. And then I was introduced to a mixtape that had like Shadows Fall, Killswitch Engage, Unearth, In Flames, At the Gates, Children of Bodom,
Hmm.
Dark Tranquility, like all these bands on one tape. And it just blew my mind. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is my music. This is what I want to be. Like, I'm just going to listen to this exclusively from now on. And that's really what I mean, for a long time, that's what it was, until, my taste really started to kind of blossom, I would say, in college. But now I listen to almost everything except for country. Um, but I listen to old school folk and stuff like that too.
Oh,
But
sure.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think with
it just
metal,
depends on my mood, really.
yeah, with metal, it's like, man, the production really took a giant leap. Like all those bands that you're describing, the production are so saturated. Whereas like the '80s thrash and the '90s, a lot of the '90s metal, it's just the production wasn't really there. It seems like there's a lot of space. So
Mm-hmm.
some of those remastered versions of those records maybe would do it for you now that they've been, they've gone back to them. But yeah,
Yeah, but I think that there was like,
metal
I
took a
don't know,
total leap
there was a
there.
way that there's a way that especially the Swedish bands, just sort of like got the way that everything was put together, and a lot of the New England hardcore metal, that was put together, like the breakdowns and the way things
Mm.
were timed out and how heavy it would get. That's where I really think it sort of took off for me. Trying to remember, like, the scream, like the screaming vocals and all that stuff. I all just took to it really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And it was that. And I would say that like a lot of the good stuff that is in that realm, like there's a lot of stuff from those bands that they still make stuff to now. But I would say that the sweet spot was 1998 to 2002. Everything that came out between that stretch, maybe even 95 through 92, I mean, through 2002, were really like, even though the production quality isn't as good as something you'd hear today, like In Flames from, their album last year versus like, Subterranean, um, or Lunar Strain, like it's come a long way. But you can go back and listen to some of those old some of the old Lunar Strain tracks, and still like they still go so hard. And you're
Yeah.
like, it's almost harder than what they do now. Bands evolve, obviously.
Hmm.
But I mean, for me, it's like Horacle is good. I listen to that a lot. That's been the one I go back to. Jester's Race. And I'm a big fan of Colony and Clayman, which have a little bit more of a thrashier, poppier, bigger chorus style, than what even their previous four albums. So I don't know. It's definitely like, I would definitely say that sweet spot. Going back and listen to bands like At the Gates, The Haunted has become a big favorite of mine in older music, because I totally understand the anger that comes out of that guy's mouth, and how frustrated he is with the world. I just feel it in the lyrics, and I can feel it in the music, and the riffs are.
Yeah.
I call The Haunted the Swedish Pantera. It's just very like, it's got that sort of vibe, but they just have that Swedish twist to it. So definitely something that if anybody haven't heard of these bands before, I definitely tell them to check them out.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I think there is that X factor about like how somebody just pulls something off. And I think one thing like, in my fandom, it's almost like the better the production gets, the more like it sort of hinders,
Hmm.
and maybe that's similar to film too, because it's like you see something that's too slick and you're like, well, shit, maybe that's too slick. And I feel that way
Hmm.
sometimes listening to music where I'm like, I want to, I want the production to be clear, but I also want it to feel like I'm in a basement watching this band like practice or play a really sweaty basement show, because those are most of
Yeah.
my fun experiences. And I think that sometimes it's like one of the reasons why I gravitated so much to punk rock was that the songs and the performances were so good that I didn't even care if the production wasn't at the highest level. Because I got into bands
Mm.
like there's a band called Lifetime from New Brunswick, New Jersey that like popped
Mm-hmm.
off in the mid 90s. And then they influenced all these bands like Saves the Day and Taking Back Sunday and all this stuff that definitely went like the softer route. But there was something about that East Coast style of music. Like when I first heard Lifetime, and I was like, whoa, these guys write like linear songs. Like these guys don't care about hooks. They write a linear song. Their breakdown is amazing. And it's a 2-minute song that you just listen to again because it doesn't get stale like a piece of bubble gum in your mouth. Like you can go back to it, and kind of reshaped like the way I thought about writing music even. So, yeah, I can totally appreciate that as bands grow and all that stuff that you're like, gosh, could you just go back into it? Could you just use some lesser equipment, guys? Put out a
Yeah, but they can't. Like they just like, you know what I mean? It's like they can't go back and undo all the things that they've learned to like progress themselves as filmmakers. And so you sort of understand that in the end, I guess. I mean, not as filmmakers, as musicians. And a lot of the times, like you'll feel them either capture a new sound that does sound great. Like I think In Flames has done it a few times in their albums over the years. Like there's just a song that's like, oh my God, they recaptured it. Here it is. They recaptured it on this one song. They couldn't get it in the album, but they got it in this song. This is what I was looking for them, was this style of writing.
yeah.
And sometimes they come up with something new, like Satellites and Astronauts on Clayman is like such a different thing, you know, and there's a few songs I believe on Reroute to Remain that have that sort of feel to them too, that are just that are different. I mean, the Jester's Dance, you know, on Jester's Race is like an interesting sort of like different style of what you would expect from like a heavy metal death band. Things like that really sort of, I do like that. I do like when musicianship comes in. I love when metal bands partner with orchestras, because when you put metal with orchestras and you hear the melodies and the music played through instruments that aren't like just heavy driving guitars and bass and keys, like you start to realize that like when you break down the musicianship of a lot of hardcore like death Swedish melodic metal, the musicianship is insane and the melodies are insane. Like going back and I listened to I think it's called The Chosen Pianist. It's a guy who does all In Flames covers on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like a whole playlist of everything that he did. Somebody else did that with like Killswitch Engage, Dark Tranquility, and you can find different songs and different things that have been taken out of the metal form and put into its core piano. And you listen to it and you go, huh, like, wow, this is actually a beautiful song.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what I hear when I hear it. You know what I mean? I hear it like that.
Yeah. And metal has, I mean, the roots to classical music are so, tightly woven into metal, and not just it's the technical prowess of the people playing the music, but also the fact that there are complex things going on that you may not really hear because it's this whole cohesive unit coming together. I think metal, I always thought that metal and punk were like the genres that people just thought were a total joke that I gravitated towards as a kid. I was like, well, I think the radio is a total joke, except for maybe like 5% of it, like,
oh my God, I can't even listen to the radio. I don't understand popular music at all. I don't understand what's appealing about it. The fact that you see all these people going to Taylor Swift concerts, like acting like a bunch of like mindless zombies. I'm like, I'm the problem.
Yeah.
Are you listening to the music that you're listening to? Like, you really think this is good? Grown men listening to Taylor Swift thinking that it's good. It's just like, what world did I wake up in? Did I die at some point and wake up in hell? Like,
maybe. We might be. This might be purgatory. Like
this may be purgatory.
Wouldn't that
I was
be the
forced to
joke?
like. I know it would be. We're all just forced to like listen to a thing where all the lamest shit becomes the most popular, and all the things that it's like actually like awesome, are it's considered underground and not cool. And it's just like, ugh.
Well, and people always go with Taylor. They're like, oh, it's so amazing. She does these 3-hour concerts, and it's like, yeah. The physical ability of her to do that. Okay, whatever. It doesn't make the music good. Like, don't justify you buying a ticket and going to the show just because, like, oh, well, what she does is impressive. Well, who the hell cares? I kind of feel like there are just certain skills that I don't care for. Like, hey, you could be a good dancer, but dancing for me doesn't tell me anything. Like, I don't know what dancing is supposed to do for the audience. And then sometimes I even, not with like every hip hop artist, but sometimes with rapping, I'm just like, why should I be impressed with this? Because some people are really creative with rapping, and then other
Yeah.
people, I'm like, what do you bring into the table? But yeah, I mean, pop music. I don't know. I think there's a lot of like, you go back to the 70s, 80s, and even like the early part of the 90s. I think there's a lot more impressive pop music than we've gotten since then.
Hmm.
And now when I hear pop stuff on the radio, there's like hardly any instruments. It's like a keyboard, a beat, and a vocal. And they're usually like singing about they're getting drunk or they want to be with somebody that makes them feel like shit. And I'm just like, what? This is commercial music. And what we're selling to people out there is go out, get fucked up, be in bad relationships that are borderline abusive, and
Hmm.
aspire to just get on the next one too. And we wonder why people have a tough time having conversations with people, building stability in their lives. And it's like, well, because you keep on eating up this terrible shit that's selling you the worst product ever, that's only benefiting the worst people on earth.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
And I
what
mean,
the
it all comes out of corporate. It's that, it's sort of the corporate influence of like managing music, trying to hedge their bets and make the most money that they can as possible,
Mhm.
and just grinding things to death and actually making artists do things that they don't want to do. But because again, there's a difference between people who want to make music, want to make movies, want to write books, want to do those things because they're compelled to, because they're talented enough to, and because they have something to say, versus people who are willing to take the money to do whatever the corporation tells them to do. And they have
Mhm.
just enough talent to get by, and they have just enough talent to execute the material that is made for them, but it's not made by them. It's made for them, and it's tailored towards a very specific, very susceptible group of people that will basically take anything that certain things are pumped out because it follows fads.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why you see so many one-hit wonders, and filmmakers too. Like, you see things come and go. The timeless people understand the core aspects of it and put in the long-term work versus the short sort of like cheap ways to get up to the top, because all they care about is either making money or being famous. And yes, we all want to make money in this business, but I'd rather make a decent wage and make a good film than make a ton of money and make a turd. you
Mhm.
know I'd
Yeah.
trade that in any day. You know what I
I
mean?
always felt like, I'm like, I'd rather have a smaller group of like a smaller, smarter audience than a big dumb audience. I mean, it's like, if I had to pick between the two, I would go with the smaller audience that's just like a little more discernible. They understand the medium a little bit better.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, and there's always people that break through. I think like one of the pop stars that I've really liked in the last almost a decade is I really like Lord's music.
Hmm.
I think
Lord,
like,
Lord, Lord, Lord,
yeah,
Lord, I am Lord.
when I first heard her, I was like, so when I first heard Royals, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, this is the best pop song I've heard in like, I don't know, 20 years or something. And then I was like, well, I want to see what her live performance is like. And it's her, a guy playing drums, and a guy playing keyboards. And I'm like,
Hmm.
yes, this is a star that like she could have a bunch of sexy people up there dancing, and she could be like selling her body and her music at the same time. But she is somebody that's at that level that's like, no, it's my shows are going to be about the music. And like, I respect the hell. I don't know if it's not like I read an interview where she put her foot in the ground and was like, I'm not going to do that, but I just like that choice nonetheless. And then there's
Well,
bands like Green Day that I loved as a kid that start putting on eyeliner and want to tell you how to vote, and it's like, well, why the hell am I going to listen to you guys?
all right.
Sitting there getting
Um,
your eyeliner put on for your arena show. Like, do you even know who your audience is anymore? Do you even remember the people that made you?
Again, it's like they're willing to sell out in that way just because the money is good enough. And yeah, that's a
Yeah.
lot of money and they'll do it. But I think, maybe they had fun doing that. Maybe that they really did like doing. You never know. But I will say, like, the joke I was going to say when you were talking about Lord and you were like, she really like sticks to her guns. I was like, yeah, that's because Randy Marsh has integrity.
uh,
I think, oh my God. Have you seen
yeah.
Panderverse?
I watched the Red Cow guys talk about it.
Oh
Shout
my
out
God.
to Red
So
Cow
good.
Arcade.
I
Yeah,
love it.
I need to watch it. It's one of those things where like I try to get my wife to watch something like that, and she didn't grow
How
up
did,
watching South Park, so she's like, South Park, and I'm like, come on, give it a chance. Like,
Honestly, like people who still think about South Park from back in the day when it was just to like, oh my God, they killed Kenny or whatever. Like it's
sure.
become one of the most poignant pieces of pop
Mm-hmm.
culture. Like Trey and Matt are geniuses.
Oh yeah.
They are complete, just sort of neutral
Mm-hmm.
um, observers of the world, and they don't pick sides. They just point everything out that everyone does that's so stupid, and they
Yeah.
just put it in everyone's faces, and then they come up with the craziest stuff as like side gags, and I love it. I think that I've heard working on South Park is hell, because the workload is so big and
Yeah.
the hours suck and all that stuff. But I think I would like to do one season or one show with them just to see them work, just to be around their genius because they are so funny and they've been making me laugh since I was in high school, like before that, but since I was in middle school.
Yeah.
So they're definitely big heroes of mine. Mr. Hanky. Howdy ho. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely a big fan of the South Park guys and everything that they do. But I think that they talk about that stuff a lot too. They really poke at pop culture and show that how self-important, a lot of these people become based on the fact that they wrote a song. Then all of a sudden
Yeah.
they're like, well, now I know more than you because you know what? I write music, so I'm going to tell you exactly what you should think. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you should have stopped it playing the music and I'll make my own
Yeah.
decisions about my life, sir.
Or yeah, people think that if you have money, it just means you're smart. Like that's not
Yeah,
really
let me tell you,
necessarily
no.
like. So just because like every athlete now, I need to listen to what they feel about things, even though 80% of the time when they get in front of a mic, they don't even know how to articulate a thought. I'm just
I
like,
know. I feel like a lot of people get caught. I was a journalism major, and I know how easy it is for people to get caught up in the news cycle and sort of the
yeah,
tricks of the trade of the way either a CNN or a Fox News or an MSNBC or a whatever thousand of the things that popped up on YouTube, like they will get into people's heads and they will crank fear, 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 fear. I mean, if you've ever seen Nightcrawler, which is one of my favorite movies, and the fact that like they are constantly trying to drive up viewership, so they're not going to tell you everything's all right, and that's
hmm,
why they are things the way they are. And then what happens is you get these pro athletes and these pro musicians and all these people who listen to that stuff, who that's their only source of sort of information. And they don't go out beyond that and they just regurgitate what everyone else is saying because that's all they know. And that's my
hmm,
problem with pop culture is people who are into pop culture, who are driven by pop culture, all they know how to do is go along with what the bigger crowd is saying. So
yeah,
if it's cool to do this, I'm not doing that because I've done the research and I've formed my own opinion and I've done all these own things. That's what everyone else is doing. Well, I have to do it too. And if you don't do it, you're a piece of shit.
sure,
And I always am very hesitant when a new group pops up with some message because I know there's some catch 22 on the other side that's going to be
hmm,
like, okay, there's something they're not thinking about. Yes, I agree. There's something wrong and we should all look at it. But the one blindsided view of saying that like now everything that you say is true and, any sort of debate against what you're saying, isn't warranted because all of a sudden, if you say it, you're all of a sudden labeled a Nazi and you're like, holy
sure,
shit. Like, I just have questions. Like there's just some blatant things
yeah,
that are kind of standing out to me that just don't seem right. So I'd like to get those questions answered. And when you watch people ask those questions, they get dragged through the mud. So you're
yeah,
telling a whole group of people who have functioning brains who say, you know what, I'm not even going to bring up the question because I don't want to get dragged through the mud. And that's the type of society that we have. We have two very
hmm,
loud, you know, sides of the aisle that are very vocal, that speak for other people when we don't ask to be spoken for, and a bunch of people who are caught in the middle who don't know what to say because they say one thing, one side comes after them. They say another thing, another side comes after them. If they say, a complete other thing, then everybody's after them. And then the next thing you know, you're famous on social media for being the dickhead who said this,
yeah,
and everyone makes fun of you. And then maybe 20 years from now, they look back and go like, actually, that person was right. Like,
yeah.
look how stupid we were acting. How many times can
There's
you go back in history and look at that? You know what I mean? Did we not learn?
Yeah, well, that's sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, witch hunts. They've always worked out.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that we never like we don't have any of those instances in our history in
McCarthyism.
this.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
like
like,
Yeah, and I think that people like, hey, if you agree with 95% of what I say, then F you because that 5% makes you a Nazi. There's
Yeah.
just there's no room for nuance, and like you're saying, even asking the question is like, "Oh, so you're not on board?" And it's like, "On board with what? Like fascism? No. No, I'm not on board with fascism." And it can come from anywhere. That whole idea of like it's beyond debate. I'm like, well, the only people that say something is beyond debate are fascists. Like
Yeah.
because if it's beyond debate, then that means that you're not even going to discuss it. You've decided that you're God now, and you've got the answer.
And
And
who
it's
made you
like,
the smartest person in the world? I think a lot of people just need to read more Kurt Vonnegut, um, and really get like one of my favorite things that he talked about. I can't remember which book it is. I think it's Sirens of Titan. But if you had, one person from one planet and they were the person on the planet who knew everything about their planet and they were always right. And then you get someone from another planet who is right on that planet and everything that they say is right on that planet. When you get those two people together, they can't agree, but they're always right. But they don't
yeah,
realize that, like, what I mean? There's no way to sort of solve the issue if you always feel that way. You have to be open up to whatever, but you also just have to be, I don't know. I feel like everything is too team oriented.
hmm
Everything is like you got to follow what the team says or else you're off the team versus like being able to make independent decisions based on independent problems. Every
hmm
problem requires a different solution, and not one way of doing things is the best solution for every problem. And so having somebody, and that's what's the good thing about leadership is that leadership is about being able to discern and take ideas from anyone and be able to execute that, understanding that that is the best idea for the moment, or that is the best idea that is going to that's going to help us achieve our goal. That is how
hmm
we want to get there. We want to get there in this specific way. Well, this is the way to do it. And it doesn't matter who it's come from. It could come from someone you don't even like. But if they have a
yeah.
good idea, you got to follow it.
I
You
feel
know
the
what I mean?
same
And
way.
that's, I think, the problem with politics. That's a problem with a lot of things in the world is that we've sort of, and the internet has made it worse. It's just allowed our circles to grow smaller and smaller and our walls to go higher and higher because we can get into places in the internet where, our views are supported and never challenged.
hmm
And anytime someone challenges your view, well, oh, block that person. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
Only
Whether it's
Siths deal in
an
absolutes, right, Mitch? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think yeah, we definitely because we're humans are tribal, but the tribes that we started out with were so relatively small compared to what we're at now. So I think
Yeah.
that tribalism on like the scale that we have it just it makes people be encouraged to go to one side of the spectrum that they're inclined to and just lean into the extreme instead of
Well,
like
again, it's the mob mentality thing.
yeah
It's this, it's tough for people to want to. Nobody doesn't not want to belong.
hmm
Nobody wants to be, witch hunted or excluded from the group. We all want it. So like we do those things. Sometimes we say things just to be a part of it. But as you get older, you start giving less and less of a fuck. So,
yeah
and that's why you have Gen X the way that they are. And, you see old people just kind of saying whatever they want. And I feel like we'll get there. I'm
hmm
starting to get there. Like I'm stopping, like I stopped caring a long time ago. Um, and I just say what I feel. And I just say what's on my mind, and it's gotten me in trouble a few times. But honestly, like there are things like that that frustrate me that I gotta just get off my chest. You know what I mean?
yeah
And you gotta come out and be able to speak your piece. And like people jump all over you every time you do. And like the one thing I've always noticed is that you'll say something and you'll bring up problems and you'll bring up things and being like, hey, I don't think this is right. I don't think that's right. I think this is screwed up. And every time the people who show up are the people who want to fight you. There's
sure
very rarely do you have anybody be like, oh, you know what? I understand why you're saying this.
yeah
Maybe this isn't the best way to go about it, but I feel you. And that could go such a long way, but we don't do that in the society. We all just want to combat each other.
hmm
And it's just, oh my God. When you say you hit 40 and the filter breaks, yep, that's exactly what it is. My filter broke a couple weeks ago, and now I'm just out here
yeah
just
well
talking shit.
it's so funny the stuff like the whenever somebody comments on something I put on Twitter, it's usually some stupid comment, and I'm like I'm not even going to engage because I know that that's what this person wants, right? So if you say something and they put a gif that's somebody saying and I'm like, well, there's no and. I made my statement. You've got nothing to say back other than and, which why would I engage with you? Because you have nothing to bring. Like, if you really had something to say, you would actually say it right there because you had the opportunity and you just said, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these people that think a meme or a GIF is a drop mic moment. And I'm like, it's like idiocracy, you know,
Oh
baiting,
my
you
God.
know?
Oh no, that's how I feel. I feel like that a lot, that I feel like idiocracy is just becoming truer every single day.
Yeah. Well, and like
Um,
I'm a big Romero fan, and all of his zombie movies, I feel like what I really love, at least about the first three and a half ish, four-ish, is that
mhm.
he puts together something that's entertaining. You can just watch it and be entertained as a movie. Or if you want to think about what it's saying about society, you have that option too. But especially in his first three, I didn't think he was hitting anyone over the head with it. And what it taught me is human zombies are just the whatever issue that's the hot button issue of the day that pits people against people, because ultimately the bad guys in every Romero zombie movie are humans and not the
Mhm.
zombies. The zombies are just there. There's some war that you don't want your country to be involved with, or an issue. I don't even know if I can say certain words on YouTube and have them get mad at me, but whatever
Yeah.
issue people
Yeah.
fight over all the time, you know, the classics. I'm like, those are the zombies, you know, and we just
Mm.
fight each other over these dumb little things. But
Totally.
yeah, once you get a little bit older, you're like, F it, I'm just gonna say it and see what happens. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think what's kind of like blew my mind about everything the last few years is like you know, growing up listening to punk rock and listening to bands like Bad Religion and No Effects, they always seemed so anti-establishment, like think for yourself, F the media. And then everything that blew up with COVID, I'm like, oh crap, these guys are like totally pro-establishment. Like, not only are they so pro, like when people say believe the science, and then they don't want to believe, they only want to believe the first science. The rest of the science is just conspiracy theory. And it's like, but the whole point of the scientific process is to go through it over and over and reprove it and learn more. That's what it is. It's a process that repeats. And so I'm
Mm.
like, these people that like used to be anti-establishment that I looked up to for a big part of my life are
They
like,
became boomers.
yeah, they're pushing people out of their lives. Like the Offspring fired their drummer because he has Guillain-Barré syndrome, and his doctor told him to not take any sort of cure for COVID because of
Mm.
his condition, that it could seriously impact his life. And he was just dropped from the band, and they don't even talk to him or like acknowledge him. And I'm like, these are the people that said they were punk rock. And Dexter's a microbiologist, and he doesn't believe in like pursuing science. Like, but whatever. The Offspring sucks.
Oh, they used to be my favorite when I was a kid. Oh no.
they had a they had a couple okay songs.
Oh yeah, but I mean, when I was in middle school, they had like they
Like
were
Smash
bangers.
is, yeah,
Yeah,
Smash is
smashes
kind of
like
fun.
crazy.
I
And then
think
they went off the
Ignition has
rails
some
with
good.
Pretty Fly for a White Guy. And then it all started to
Oh
go
yeah,
downhill.
yeah, where it was just like, wow, these are like bad Weird Al songs. Like I love Weird
I
Al,
know.
but what is the Offspring doing? Let's see here. We got Tyler was talking about the instruments he plays. We got Mitch chiming in as
Yeah, Mitch is ready
well.
to go off on his own political rants.
Uh oh.
Um, but I would say it's getting a little late out here.
Yeah. No, no. I
I'm
think
starting to
we've been at
tap
it.
out.
Yeah, we've been at it for
We've been at it
three
for a
hours
while.
now.
This is
Yeah.
a pretty classic Vinny DiSanti interview where it'll just go on if you let me.
Yeah, I watched
For sure.
the Slash Tracks interview that you did with those guys, and that one was pretty long too.
Yeah,
That was
no,
fun.
I mean, I can go on for a while. I mean, even like I gotta say, you keeping up, that's goes to show like you got the energy, and maybe because I'm 40, that's why I'm starting to slow down.
Well, hey,
Uh,
I'm 41 and a half
you
today.
are?
I'm a big boy. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow, I didn't know
I'm
that.
an old guy. Yeah,
I didn't
but
know
no,
you were
it's
old like me.
yeah, and it's only 8:30 out here, so that's a lot
Yeah,
easier. But Alley Girl, I am gonna check out that Def Leppard with the orchestra. I do. I saw
nice.
that. I like some good old Def Lep. I can, you know, enjoy that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out in the chat.
Hmm.
Really, I didn't know if anyone was going to show up, and I figured I had faith that Vin was going to bring some people out. So really cool to see everybody showing up here and hanging with us.
Heck
And
yeah.
yeah, Vin, thank you so much for chatting with me about things on topic and things off topic and things that should get us in trouble on Twitter later. Oh,
Yeah, I know. Now we're all
speaking
gonna
of
get canceled because we're
speaking
like,
of
oh, I don't follow pop culture.
yeah, they must like this one particular politician that I don't like, even though I don't know that for sure.
I
um,
know they're just gonna
but
assume. But all the
Speaking of,
Swifties are coming after us for sure.
oh yeah, they're pretty brutal. Yeah, I can't even watch an NFL game now without her popping up. But speaking of controversial things, I've not yet watched the Terrifier films, but Cecil let me borrow them. He said I should watch them, and I'm frightened because I've seen you post about them, and I'm like, oh no, is this just going to be dreadfully bad, like gore
Listen,
for the
like
sake of
it can
gore with
be
nothing else?
whatever it wants to be, just as long as it stays far away from Friday the 13th. I don't want that's really where it all stemmed from. It was like
Yeah,
that's fine for what it is. I'm glad it found its audience, but don't equate that success with the type of like in this, and it comes down to me with my Friday the 13th fandom. I've been waiting a long time for Friday the 13th to get picked back up and go. And if
hmm,
you're going to delve into the depths of like super indie producers and filmmakers to go do that, like I'm standing right here for one thing. And
yeah,
two, you can do a lot better than that. Like, you know what I mean? You form your own opinion about it. If you like it, you like it. That's not a big deal. But I'm just saying, if I waited 20 something years for a new Friday the 13th and then it just turns out to be Terrifier the 13th, I would be,
yeah,
it would break my heart. It would break my heart. It would be like everything we did with Never Hike Alone was for nothing. Nobody learned anything. And we were just going
yeah.
right back to the way things were and maybe even getting worse. So yeah, I mean, it really just came down to that. And I just was like, I just wanted to be like, no, because everybody was running with that article. And I
Hmm,
was like, why? Like,
yeah,
what is going on here? Like, there are so many other filmmakers out there that like would love to do Friday the 13th and have way more experience. But for some reason, why are we choosing this filmmaker who has really only given us something that doesn't equate to that?
hmm.
And I don't know. I was just being really protective of Friday the 13th, and I feel like
It's your
the
baby.
Terrifier, yeah, the Terrifier crowd is another one that's just like it's like the Snyderverse Swifties, like all that thing. Like you say something
Hmm,
about it, and they all show up and they want to tear you to pieces. But that's just the way I feel, and I don't feel like that's the best fit. I will stand by that till the end of time, and I will not. I will be only relieved when they announce somebody like Eli Roth or David Bruckner or Gareth Evans from The Raid and Apostle, films, or Adam Wingard, somebody of that stature who has put in years in the studio system, who knows how to run a studio movie, who can make big budget movies look big budget and great and tell a story at the same time. Those are the types of
hmm.
filmmakers that we want. Like, hey, you guys love gore. You want to watch gore for 4 hours with no story? Then
Mm,
Terrifier is the thing for you. That's all
yeah,
you. Do it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, go ahead and have fun with it. Like, we all have our guilty pleasures and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that I want to see Friday the 13th go through the same avenue with the same creatives behind it, because just not my thing. And as a
yeah. And
big Friday the 13th fan with a voice and a platform, I'm going to be very vocal about it to say, no,
yeah,
no, 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 no. This is not what the fans want. It is what a very small group of people want who like a very niche film, but just
hmm,
because they're loud in a niche market doesn't mean that they speak for the rest of the world. And, only time will tell, but it just seemed like it was a non-story. It was getting blown up for no reason. And
hmm.
2 weeks after Never Hike Alone 2 as well, like if you wanted to ask somebody about where Friday the 13th should go, I'm standing right here. Like
Yeah,
I could have given you a lot more than, well, you should set it in the 80s and make Jason scary again. I'm sorry, but that's not news.
yeah,
Like I've been on like horror forums for more than half my life, and people have been saying put it in the 80s and make Jason scary again on
yeah,
forums since like 2002.
yeah. We
So
already have those movies too,
we already
so we
have
can
those
always go
movies.
back to those. And people always want to bring up. I think when a franchise comes up, like even with Halloween, people were like, "Oh, who should do it?" And they always bring up people that already have great careers and great properties of their own. So it's
Mhm.
like we need those people, the people that are out there doing their own thing, to maybe oversee, maybe do like a producer role and find somebody like yourself to be like, hey, we should actually promote this person that's already has shown that they can tackle this thing. Because yeah,
Mhm.
Damien's already got Terrifier, and if people want somebody like Robert Eggers to do Halloween, I'm like, well, why would he do that? Like he gets to make a different movie every time he goes out there, and has his own style. So why would he step back and be like, all right, I'll be told what to do and make a Halloween movie? It's like we need
Yeah.
some new blood, pun
We
intended.
just it just need somebody with like there's just I don't know, there's a certain level of execution that I want to see done. And you can make an argument against me because I've only done it at a certain level. I've only spent so much money. I get it. And I would totally accept that. But you know what I mean? I could still go in and be like, hey, like beyond the obvious of it would be nice to set it in the 80s. And of course we want Jason to be scary again. Let's go into the story, the story of Friday the 13th. Let's get into the thing of reason. Why are we telling the story again? How can we make this story better? Here are the story threads that are thematic, that match with the old films and a new film. Here's something that will, connect to new audiences. This is something that's timeless. The aesthetic, all of those things are things that I could go in and at least give them. These are what's worked for me. And if you did this at a big studio level, it would work even better for you. Honestly, I think if the studios came in and bought Never Hike Alone as a story and did the Never Hike Alone film at a studio level with some extra bells and whistles, and brought back Andrew Lady to reprise his role for sure.
Oh my God, he's amazing.
I feel like that could be like, that doesn't have to be in the 80s. That doesn't have to follow the formula from the 80s with the multiple people. We proved that it could work, and with a little bit more, production and, money and support, that could be even scarier and better as a theme. And so you don't have to rely on that stuff. Jason could be just as scary, if not more scarier in that setting, as we proved that it could be. What Friday the 13th needs is a visionary, somebody with a vision, somebody who knows where it's going to be 3 films from now. That's what it needs. Not just surface level, suggestions. Somebody who, if they're going to write an article about them, should have some in-depth knowledge and to say, this is how I think Friday the 13th should go. And I know Mitch was poo-pooing the Peacock series earlier, but you know what? Brian Fuller is a proven, showrunner. He did Hannibal. He got that through 2 or 3 seasons, and people wanted more. And it didn't get shut down because it wasn't a good show. It got shut down because of studio bullshit. And so, I have hopes for that show doing things with Friday the 13th that, again, elevate it as a series, and not to make it like elevated like Hereditary, where like only a third of the audience will get it and then even less of those people will appreciate it. But like elevate it from the standpoint of like what Never Hike Alone did, which was take things that were already there and just make them better and just give them a little bit more pride and care, and not worry about Sean's little formula of every 5 minutes it's either going to be Jason killing somebody or some boobies. Like that audience is, all in geriatric care now. They're not watching these movies anymore, and we don't need to rely on slasher films for boobs. So you no longer need to get people in the theaters with boobs to watch your film. You can actually tell a good story, and more people will show up. And that's what I'd like. And that's really my problem with Terrifier, is the fact that you can say what you want about the effects and all those things. They have failed to me to create a story that makes sense. And to be able to tie up even their own loose ends. And they're making the same mistakes that the original Friday's making. Like, it still gets their audience and they still do their thing and their audience doesn't care. But if you're going to say that person needs to be in charge of Friday the 13th, no. That's no. I'm just going to say no, because I would want somebody who had a better grasp of storytelling and didn't rely so much on shock value as their only ticket to get people into the theater, which is, if you talk to even Terrifier fans, are like, I'm not there for the story. I'm just there to watch art rip people apart. Yeah. And it's like,
it's never been my thing with horror. Like I've always
it's like, okay, then you can rent Terrifier and Faces of Death and you can have yourself a good weekend. You know what I mean? But you're talking about something that's a little bit more to the horror world than, the original thought of a killer clown, because that's the most original thing in the world I've ever heard.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I guess, and it's really weird. Like with me, like slashers, I don't need that much blood, but a movie like Evil Dead, like that series, I want all the crazy, fantastical blood, because that's what those stories are based around, is something supernatural and demonic and over the top. And so that's what I want from that. But a slasher, I'm just sort of like, I don't need it to linger on stuff. And then there's something like When Evil Lurks that's right there too, where it's like, it feels like if Christopher Nolan did an Evil Dead movie, because it's grounded and there's demonic possession, but it's not silly. And man, some of the best acting.
And it's got original concepts, and it feels like it's in a world that I've never seen before. Like, they're working on rules that are new, that you actually have to pay attention, because you haven't seen this film like 20 times. You know what I mean? Like, you've never seen a film like this before. And so it feels like a fresh experience.
Yeah.
It's in another language and you're watching subtitles and you're gripped the entire way and you wonder what's going to happen next and how are they going to solve this issue. And then the violence is real. Everyone's a target. No one is
Hmm.
safe. And it's done in such a natural way where it feels like you're being told a story by someone who knows how to tell a story. And
Yeah.
that is the difference between horror films for me. Like there are films that are just goofy and fun and you watch them, but you know what? I even think about like it made me think about like Killer Clowns from Outer Space. As silly and ridiculous as that film is, it has a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
It has things that it sets up in the first act that pays off in the third act.
Hmm.
No, there are no hanging story threads, and everything is very entertaining. So it does all of those things within a package that was in a
Hmm.
low budget form. I think they did it for like $2 or $3 million back in the 80s, and they still managed to tell a story with it. And for
Yeah.
some reason, in the modern age, gore and just over the topness has superseded the need to even be able to dole out a functioning story in a feature film. And
Yeah.
that's because we have things like streaming that you're allowed to go to streaming platforms without being rated. You don't need a rating. So now you can do the things that the old 80s films didn't do, which is do extreme gore, get
Mm.
everybody in there to watch the extreme gore show. But the story behind it really doesn't make any difference because people are only tuning in for the gore. They're fast forwarding through the other scenes and don't care
Yeah.
about the other characters because they just want to see people get killed.
Hmm.
And I understand that that's a part of the horror genre and that's never going to go away. Um, and it has its place. And, we all like to enjoy a good gore, fest every now and then. We like to see those things happen. Um, but again, specifically coming down to Friday the 13th, that's not what I want from a Friday the 13th. I
Yeah.
want Friday the 13th to be a little bit more than what it used to be, and it can be. And that's what we've proven. And I want Friday the 13th to continue to trend in that direction versus going backwards and
Hmm.
becoming something that is just going to be, just mindless and dumb.
Yeah. No, I think you're dead on. And yeah, clearly what you've done, through your work is show that it is possible. And the films need a showrunner too. They like you hire somebody and you trust that person to carry through a 3-part arc where each
Mm.
story within itself has 3 pieces, but you're telling a grander story.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
they need to bite
yeah.
that bullet and dedicate themselves to doing it instead of, well, we'll do one and we'll see what happens, because that's how the David Gordon Green trilogy got kind of messed up. They maybe would have done something different with 2018 if they knew they guaranteed had 2 more movies.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I think we need
yeah.
that, and yeah, we definitely need you there. Carrying that flag through the battlefield of Friday the
Yeah.
13th. Well,
Well, one day,
I've
hopefully
kept you.
one day. But in the meantime, like yeah, I know. I feel pretty confident where it's at right now. I don't think that they're going in that direction. There are a lot bigger names that they're going to go after because it's such a cherished franchise. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, and we'll. I did my thing with Friday the 13th. I would love to work on one day. We'll see if that happens. But in the meantime, I'm a fan again. You know what I mean? And I'm going
Yeah.
to be a very vocal fan. I'm going to, if things are good or bad, I'm going to be vocal about it. And I'm going to, and I can tell with confidence why
Hmm.
things are good or bad in the Friday the 13th world because I played with those elements and I know how they work. I've
Yeah.
driven the car, even though I
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to. I stole the keys. I took it for a spin. I put in a pretty good lap time.
Yeah.
And so I think I earned a right to say some stuff because, I don't see anyone else who dedicated 6 or 7 years of their life to making a Friday the 13th fan series that was so as much well received. And I'm not trying to just toot my own horn. I'm just saying, like, I'm going to say things because I
Hmm.
feel like I've earned the right to.
Yeah.
And if people have a problem with that, they have a problem with it. But I'm not going to sit back and watch the Swifties of horror take over my favorite franchise and turn
Yeah.
it into some backwoods like shit fest.
For sure.
I have standards, and that's just me. But maybe that's
Yeah.
just me being tired and cranky. But that's just how I feel about it.
Well, it is 10:40 out there
Mm-hmm.
in Massachusetts, and
10-4, good buddy.
and yeah, I mean, I think that everyone's got your back, Vin. So say what you want about Friday the 13th because you're a card carrying member. You're the only one with a card at this point in that club. Yeah, and we've definitely got your back. So thank you so much for chatting with me and fighting through the yawns.
I know I'm like barely there. I'm gonna crash right after this.
You've been great though. This has been awesome.
No,
And
dude,
again,
it's been a pleasure. I enjoy talking to you. I'm looking forward to bumping into you at the next con. I'll probably be out in Phoenix or LA at some point for something, so I'll definitely see you out there, and we'll sit down and have a chat.
for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I want to chat with you about some other stuff that doesn't need to be here. It's private, people. No,
Okay. Ooh.
Um, no, but thank you again to everybody out in the chat there. Tyler, Mitch, Alley Girl. We saw Cecil and Robert
Another
the Wolf
hour.
Man in there. Another hour. There it is. Okay. No, I'll cut it off. Another hour.
Just crash out of the
Lupe,
screen.
Lupe has just been killing it tonight. I'm going to go eat some pumpkin pie and think about Lupe,
Save some of the
Lupe.
chocolate stuff for me.
Okay, for sure. Awesome,
All
guys.
right.
Well, thank you so much for dropping by. Thanks again to Vin and to Cecil for helping me set all of this up because I am a total newbie when it comes to all of this. If you guys like what you saw here today, you can check out the channel. Maybe I've passed 100 subscribers, depending on what you guys think, but I was at like 97 last time I checked. I know it's a small milestone, but looking to just stack up all the little wins we can. And I do have a new video ready to go that I'm going to drop. It's who I think should play Freddy Krueger when they reboot A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's probably somebody that you've never heard of, but maybe somebody that you saw in something recent. So I'm not touching on the old guys, and I'm not touching on any of the younger people that are huge stars or household names. And I've got a 5-minute video to build my case. So take or keep an eye out for that, and I'll let Vin eviscerate me on Twitter if he disagrees.
Yeah, like, damn you! How dare you? No, I'm just kidding.
And I'll post "and" in response.
And I'm just gonna put "and" underneath. Then that's all
Yeah.
I'm gonna be my response.
I already said
All right, man.
everything. Why are you saying "and"? All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Vin. Take care, man. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Have a good one.
Bye.